Welcome to the Lincoln City Council meeting of June 6th, 2016. Let us all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by a period of silent meditation.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
In accordance with LB 898, a copy of the Open Meetings Act is located in the back of the chamber. The order of the business of the City Council is as follows. The clerk will call the items listed on the agenda under public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak on an item should come forward after the clerk reads that item. The applicant and those in favor of the item should speak first, then those opposed. The applicant may then make one short rebuttal. Each speaker should begin by stating his or her name, address, and whether or not he or she is speaking in favor or in opposition to the item. Testimony will be limited to 5 minutes per speaker, and as a reminder, the timer will sound after 4 minutes. After all public hearings, the council will vote on resolutions and the items on the agenda listed under third reading. On the second and last meetings of the month, immediately prior to the adjournment, anyone may speak on any issue not on the agenda for that date nor planned for a future agenda. Will the clerk please call the first item of business?
Yes. First, I would request those giving testimony to please clearly state your name and address and to sign in on the sign-in sheet laying on the podium. Our first item is our public hearing consent agenda, items 1 through 21.
Is there anyone here wishing to testify on any of these items? Seeing no one, Teresa, will you please call the next item?
Just a second. It's
Oh, sorry.
Mr.
Okay. Do we have Mr. Ward, an appointee to the Alarm Appeals Board here? Oh, please come forward. Welcome. Thank you for coming down. Do you want to state your name and address into the microphone?
Patrick Ward, 7519 Cardwell Circle, Lincoln, Nebraska, 68523.
Okay. Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Ward? Done.
Would you go ahead, Mr. Ward, and just tell us a little bit about yourself and
Sure.
quality or qualifications for this board?
Sure. I got into business with my brother 36 years ago in Omaha, and then moved to Lincoln with my wife about 27 years ago, and have been in the alarm industry all those years. January 1st, we bought my brother out of our Lincoln office, and now a little more intimate family, continued family tradition with my 3 of my children and my wife and some other local residents.
Thank you.
All right. We rely on volunteers to make this city run. Thank you for being willing to be one of them.
You're welcome.
Okay. Teresa, you can go ahead and have a seat. Teresa, will you call the next item?
If there's nothing else, we can vote on these items. Item 1 was introduced by Raybold.
So moved.
Second.
Seconded by John. Next item, please.
I'll call the vote. Camp?
Please call the vote.
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Fellers?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Next then is item 2. I need a motion to approve the request of Public Works to set.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Moved by Trent, seconded by Roy. Please call the roll.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Fellers?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Items 6 through 18 were introduced by Camp.
So moved.
Second.
Second by Carl. Please call the roll.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Fellers?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Raybold?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Next then are our public hearing liquor resolutions. Those giving testimony are asked to come forward, raise their right hand for the clerk to administer the oath. After the oath, witnesses shall state their names and addresses. I'll call item 22, application of the Keg to expand its Class C liquor license by the addition to the area of a new licensed area described as a one-story building measuring approximately 27 feet by 140 feet, including an outdoor area measuring approximately 18 feet by 36 feet to the southwest, located at 104 North 20th Street. Is someone here from the Keg? Please come forward. Raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth as you verily believe it to be?
Yes.
Thank you.
Welcome. Why don't you
Just
tell us?
state your name and address.
Patrick Gray, 2320 North, or West Laguna Road, Lincoln, Nebraska, 68522.
Welcome. Please tell us about your application.
We would like to put in a outdoor beer garden just to the southwest side of the building. The building narrows at that point, and it's a perfect place. It doesn't take up any parking to put it right there. And I've gone through the process with building and planning and also liquor commission for the fence. So other than that, I guess I don't know what else to say.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from council? Carl?
So this, thinking about the layout, this would be on the O Street corner there?
It'll actually run north-south. I do have the plans with me if you'd like to take a look.
Sure, we can put them on this.
Okay. I'll hold that. It's got a fold on it.
So that's O Street on the,
That's O Street
Sorry.
running
Okay.
up and down.
okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Would anyone else like to testify on this item? If so, please come forward. Seeing none, Teresa, please call the next item.
All right, next is item 23, application of Cappy's Bar for a special designated license to cover an outdoor area measuring approximately 60 feet by 60 feet at 5560 South 48th Street on June 12th from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m.
I'm back again. John Caparelli, 5560 South 48th Street, Cappy's Bar.
Can you tell us about your event?
It's an annual event. This will be the 20th year, actually. It started in '96. Just an open bike show, no competition, just an outdoor event with food, beer garden. Been doing it for years.
Any questions for Mr. Apparelli? Carl?
Where is this held? I saw the address, but I want.
Just right in our front parking lot.
Okay.
Block off part of it, we leave. We still leave parking, but
Okay.
we do part of it.
All right, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Would anyone else like to testify on this item? Seeing none, Teresa, please call the next item.
All right, next I'll call items 24 through 27. They are the application of Backswing Brewing Company for a Class CK liquor license and a Class L liquor license at 500 West South Street, Suite A, and the related manager application of Thomas Walker.
Is the applicant here? Oh, please come on down.
Hi, please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth as you verily believe it to be?
I do.
Thank you. Just state your name and address.
My name is Thomas Walker, 14255, Omaha, Nebraska.
Welcome. Can you please tell us about your applications?
We're applying for the licenses. We're gonna hope to open up a brewery over there at 500 West South Street, the old where Blue Blood used to be. Actually, they used to contract brew our beer for a little while for brewskis, and then offered us the opportunity to potentially move in. We kind of took them up on that, and we're hoping now to get approval by you guys to continue on with that process then.
Any questions from council? Carl?
Yeah. Food? Any food service?
Probably be doing something with food trucks once the tap room eventually gets open. In the beginning, we'll probably be just doing the manufacturing part of getting the distribution of the beer out. Then eventually the tap room will hopefully be open then down the road.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Would anyone else like to speak to this item? Okay, Teresa, please call the next item.
All right, next then, I will call items 28 and 29. Application of Gourmet Grill for a Class C liquor license at 6891 A Street, Suite 202, and the related manager application of Palwasha Barkzai.
Is the applicant here for these items? Could we please have Conan Schaefer address the council regarding these two?
Conan Schaefer, investigator with the Lincoln Police Department.
Did you have some information for the council you thought was relevant to our recommendation on these two items?
Yes. First, I'd like to note that I didn't expect that the applicants would show up today. They had voiced several times over the past few weeks that they were going to withdraw the application. However, they did not officially do that with the Liquor Control Commission, so had to keep it on the agenda. During the initial investigation, Palwasha was actually not a part of the application. It was her husband was the primary applicant, and she came in or was on the application as his wife. As the primary applicant, Mr. Ahmad Sir Sultani was statutorily ineligible due to a disqualifying Class 1 misdemeanor that he had failed to disclose on the initial application. So when I met with him and informed him that this was a disqualifying conviction that would preclude him from having a liquor license, the two of them went to the Liquor Commission and changed the paperwork, took him off, put her on as the sole member of the company, and then he signed a spousal affidavit of non-participation, which is pretty specific, which precludes him from having anything to do with the business. He can't work there, represent himself as an owner, sweep the floors or anything. He could go in as a patron. However, he had already voiced to me before and after being informed that he wasn't eligible, that he intended to work there. She had also voiced after they had changed the paperwork that it was his intent to work there. So we believe that they were not being upfront with us about that aspect. There was another concern. The actual business is operated and has been operated under a different corporation for some time. They pay occupation taxes and sales tax under a different entity, and the entity that they created to obtain the liquor license was created solely for the purpose of getting the liquor license and not disclosing all of the corporate officers of that, and that was also would have been in violation of state statute. There was just multiple things that were problematic with the application, and which is, I think they just haven't, we'll continue to work with them on having them officially go through the process of withdrawing the application, but they just haven't done that yet.
Okay, thank you for that information. Does council have any questions? Thank you, Conan.
Okay.
Would anyone else like to speak to this item? Okay, Teresa, please call the next item.
Certainly. Next would be items 30 and 31. They're the application of La Cabana for a Class I liquor license at 3223 Cornhusker Highway number 3, and the related manager application of Guillermo Haro.
Come on down. And if you see your application later on down this list and you're next up, feel free to move down earlier. And
Just
all
raise
right.
your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth as you rarely believe it to be?
Yes.
Thank you. Just state your name and address.
Guillermo Haro Jr. from 6000 South 88th Street, Lincoln, Nebraska, 68526.
Welcome. Can you please tell us about your application?
Yes, we're hoping to open a restaurant, primarily Hispanic food, and focusing on seafood, Hispanic seafood. I don't know if you guys know about like ceviche and stuff like that.
Any questions? Jane?
When do you hope the restaurant will open?
That's tough. There's a lot of process that I still have to go through, like fire marshal and all that stuff, and hopefully within the next 2 months.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Would anyone else like to testify on this item? All right, seeing nobody. Teresa, please call the next item.
All right, next then is item 32, manager application of Colin Darrow for Crawford's at 101 North 14th Street, Suite 1. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth as you verily believe it to be?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Hello.
Colin Darrow, Gretna, 401 Chestnut Drive, Gretna, Nebraska.
Tell us about your application today.
We are changing our space at Crawford, so we will also be changing the name. We're going from nearly a 300-person capacity down to about 75. We sold 2/3 of it, and we are going to go more for a lounge, just open 3-4 nights a week to start with. We have a food manager that's working on a menu right now. It'll be more of a craft beer, fine wine, cocktails, and those things of that sort.
Any questions from council? Carl?
Yeah, so would this be that space used to be kind of long. Would this be on the
Correct.
east or west
I
side?
actually
of the space?
have because we just sold it. I don't know if I can zoom in on that.
It'll come up.
Here it is. You can zoom.
Turn around so north is the top. So this would be O Street here,
Mhm.
and this would be 14th Street. Jimmy John's would be right here.
Right.
These two spaces we sold, these two cars. So this would be the small little restaurant that we would still occupy. So like I said, our capacity is probably gonna be in the neighborhood of 75 now. So we won't probably, in the past 2 tries, we went from this space to the whole space. Now we're just minimizing. So we will be more of, like I said, our clientele will be more of upper aged as far as cheap college focus.
Okay.
All right.
I'm not going to ask you to define upper age, but
I believe the term is upscale.
I think that's it, within walking distance of your place there, Carl.
All right. Thank you very much. Would anyone else like to speak to this item? All right, Teresa, please call the next item.
All right, next then are items 33 and 34, application of North Star Express for a Class D liquor license at 5700 North 33rd Circle, and the related manager application of John Ofori. Would you
Madam
raise
Chair,
your
if I-
right hand?
If I could interrupt for a second, I think
Yeah.
Investigator Schaefer wanted to say something on the prior item.
was that?
Okay,
If you, I apologize.
Prior to this application.
No, yes, the one we just heard.
Oh.
I believe he wanted to.
Excuse me,
you
gentlemen.
want to
We-
speak on Crawford's?
Okay.
Go ahead and have a seat.
Investigator Schaefer with Lincoln Police Department. Mr. Darrow is actually here on a manager application. It was mislinked, and the deletion application is what you may have in front of you, or do you show a manager application? He rightly so, there is.
Manager.
Is the manager? Okay, the one that was linked online was so he went over appropriately the deletion application, which will be coming to you at a different time. And he was appearing before you today regarding his manager application. He's been an owner of that corporation for some time and is just replacing a manager, Randy Wilson, that is no longer with them. So I just wanted you to be clear on what you were voting on.
Okay. And Teresa, will you be able to fix that on the agenda I'm not sure what date you think you can get the second part? The actual deletion, if that will
Yes.
follow quickly? Okay.
Yes.
But it's okay to vote on the manager application despite the linking issue?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for pointing that out.
Okay.
Okay.
Sorry, gentlemen.
Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth as you verily believe it to be?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. Just give your name and address.
Yeah. My name is John Ofori, 5609 South 31st Street, apartment 15, Lincoln, Nebraska, 68516.
Thank you for being here today, and does
Yeah, he's
your
my partner.
associate want to introduce himself as well?
I'm Robert Asante, 7215 North 15th Street, Lincoln, Nebraska, 68521.
Welcome. Can you please tell us about your application?
Yeah, please, we are applying for a liquor license for a convenience store. Yes.
Okay. Any questions? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Would anyone else like to testify on these items? Okay, please call the next item, Teresa.
All right, next then is item 35, application of Elks BPO Lincoln Lodge 80 for a special designated license to cover an outdoor area measuring approximately 40 feet by 40 feet at Lincoln Elks Lodge number 80 at 5910 South 58th Street, Suite A, on June 18th from 5:30 p.m. to 10 p.m. Just state your name and address.
Larry Schwint, 7900 Anna Place, Lincoln, Nebraska.
Welcome. Can you
Thank you.
please tell us about your event?
Our event is our Women's Auxiliary of the Elks Lodge is having their national convention here. It's a 7-day convention. They will be having it at the Cornhusker Hotel. And on the 18th, we'll be having a tailgate party for the participants who want to come out and enjoy that. We have capacity inside for about 120 people, but we're going to have about 250 people show up for this event. So we need a little bit of overflow room, which will be a tent outside of our building. And we would like our guests to be able to enjoy adult beverages outside.
Any questions? All right. Thank you very
All
much.
right, thank you.
Would anyone else like to speak to this item? All right, next item, please, Teresa.
All right, next then is item 36, application of SMG Food and Beverage for a special designated license to cover an outdoor area measuring approximately 460 feet by 453 feet, labeled patron parking, and outdoor area measuring approximately 965 feet by 1,137 feet, labeled show cars number 1, an outdoor area measuring approximately 652 feet by 406 feet, labeled show cars number 2, and an outdoor area measuring approximately 2,082 feet by 18 feet, labeled pedestrian bridge, all on map 1 at Pinnacle Bank Arena at 400 Pinnacle Arena Drive on June 25th from 7 a.m. to 6:30 p.m.
Good afternoon. I'm Tom Lorenz with Pinnacle Bank Arena, SMG. The event we're talking about here is Good Guys Car Show. This will be the second year we've had this. It's in the festival space, and it also extends into some of the Salt Dogs area around us. Approximately 700 to 1,000 cars. We work with Speedway Motors on this and also the CVB. Very successful last year. People are allowed to walk into the area. They pay to get in the area. And the liquor license, we don't sell a lot of beer, but at least it's available as folks walk around and look at these wonderful classic cars. There's also an autocross area that is in, I think it's lot 20, which is next to the Salt Dogs, where that's contained within the area also. It's a nice day, and it happens to be the same day that, so folks can go to the car show during the day and then cruise out to the bowl at night and see Ringo Starr play at the Pinewood Bowl. So both in one day.
Sounds great. Any questions, John?
Just for future reference, you listed the zip code incorrectly on there. You had 408 and it's supposed to be 68508.
It should be 508. We'll look at that, John. Thanks.
Just for future reference.
Sure.
Any other questions?
Details.
Oh, Teresa had it right. It's patron parking. What's not Patron parking. When I saw
Right.
the SDL, I wasn't sure. Okay.
And you know what? We don't even sell much Patron, so probably can leave it at patron.
You might if you had the parking.
That's good.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
Would anyone else like to speak to this item? All right, seeing none, Teresa, please call the next item.
All right, next then is the application of Empyrean Brewing Company for an SDL to cover an indoor area measuring approximately 70 feet by 70 feet and an outdoor area measuring approximately 50 feet by 50 feet at 300 South 7th Street on June 16th from 5 p.m. to 11 p.m.
Jim Engelbart, 3340 Franklin Street, Lincoln, Nebraska, 68506.
Hello.
Hi.
Please tell us about your application.
Same event that I've been here the last 2 months for. This is our biking and beer event called Tour de Brew. It's not Vikings, it's biking. So this is an event that starts at Moran's Liquor Store. We're partnered up with Moran's on this, and the bikers start there, travel over to the bike store on Vine Street, and then have several destinations they can stop at and get a raffle ticket for a raffle that happens at our warehouse. We apply for the SDL. We do have an L class license at the warehouse, but we applied for the SDL to cover just the portion of the indoor area we're using for the event and an outdoor area outside where we have access to facilities like porta potties, that sort of thing.
Okay, any questions? Jane?
What is the charity that you're going to be writing for this time? I always ask you that.
You asked me this question
I
last
know.
month, and I don't know. I have to leave that to Moran's. It's different every month, and I can't keep track of them.
You should know, because then you get an opportunity to
Tell everybody.
promote it, and we're promoting this charity.
Correct.
Yeah.
It's horrible for me in terms of marketing.
Looks like it's the Lincoln Bike Kitchen.
Lincoln Bike Kitchen this time.
Okay,
Thank
great.
you.
Mm-hmm. All right.
There you go.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you. Would anyone else like to speak to this item? All right, Teresa, please call the next item.
All right, next then is item 38, application of Junto LLC for a special designated license to cover an outdoor area measuring approximately 10 feet by 10 feet at Haymarket Farmers Market at Canopy Street on June 18th and July 16th from 8 a.m. to 1 p.m. As I mentioned in our previous meeting, the applicant is unable to attend today, so they asked for a 1-week delay until June 13th.
Okay. Is there anyone else who wanted to speak to this item? All right, seeing none, we'll pass over to the last item, Teresa.
All right, next then would be item 39, application of JSD LLC for a special designated license to cover an outdoor area measuring approximately 40 feet by 80 feet at Insane Inflatables at Northwest 46th and Northwest 44th and Air Park on June 17th from noon to 11 p.m. and June 18th from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m.
You state your name and address for the record?
Sandy McCorkindale, 1906 Gunnison Drive, Lincoln.
Okay, and tell us about Insane Inflatables and your event.
This is the second year. It's a nationwide company that they travel from larger cities where they set up a course. This will be the second year they're in the Air Park area. Our establishment, Huskerville Pub and Pizza, they've asked us to provide refreshments, I guess beverages on site this year for the Friday night setup and then Saturday during the actual event. And they are in charge of the fencing for it. And again, we'll be doing the beverages for them.
Questions, Jane?
Is this an obstacle course?
It is.
Okay.
It's like a 3.1 mile obstacle course. They block off an area out in Air Park, and I think it's $65 to participate, but it's all kinds of slides and kind of like that crazy stuff you see on TV when they do those courses. It's a neat thing. So.
All right, Carl?
I saw some conflicting dates. What are the dates?
Friday night, the 17th, is the setup.
Okay.
They've asked us to cater to the employees or volunteers that night. The actual event is that Saturday morning, the 18th, starting at 8 a.m. And I think they have different runs they go, and it goes through, I think, a noon, 1 o'clock type time frame. They usually run a little behind schedule, I think is why we've asked for an extension there.
John?
I noticed on your attendance, you're projecting 2,500 and maximum at any one time is 2,000. But if I understand your application, you're looking at, 3,200 square feet that you would license?
For just a beer garden area.
Okay, so you don't expect all 2,000?
Not at all. It's more of a young adult type event, and I don't think there'll be much alcohol served. Actually, they've asked us. We said we'd provide the service for them. So.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anyone else like to speak to this item? All right.
Madam Chair, I'd like to first move approval of items
22 through 27?
Yeah, 22 to 27, thank you.
Okay.
Second.
Moved by John, seconded by Roy. Please call the roll. Or is there any further discussion on those items? Sorry. Okay, please call the roll.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Fellers?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Rabel?
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0.
Then, Madam Chair, I'd like to move for denial of items 28 and 29. Second.
Moved by John, seconded by Trent. Discussion? All right, please call the roll.
Camp.
Yes.
Christensen.
Yes.
Eskridge.
Yes.
Fellers.
Yes.
Gaylor Baird.
Yes.
Lamb.
Yes.
Rabel.
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0.
Then I'd like to move approval of items 30 through 37.
Second.
Moved by John, seconded by Roy.
What, could we add 39?
Sure.
Sure, why not?
That'd be fine.
All right.
Second that.
Motion to amend with adding number 39,
Those
seconded
would
by
be
Roy.
30 through 37 and 39. Who seconded?
Roy.
Roy, thank you. All right, Camp.
Yes.
Christensen.
Yes.
Eskridge.
Yes.
Fellers.
Yes.
Gaylor Baird.
Yes.
Lamb.
Yes.
Rabel.
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0.
And finally, I'd move 1 week's delay with public hearing for item 38.
Second.
Moved by John, seconded by Jane. Discussion? Okay, please call the roll.
Camp.
Yes.
Christensen.
Yes.
Eskridge.
Yes.
Fellers.
Yes.
Gaylor Baird.
Yes.
Lamb.
Yes.
Rabel.
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. All right then, public hearing resolutions. Item number 40 is accepting the report of new and pending claims against the city and approving disposition of claims set forth for the period of May 1st through the 15th, 2016.
Okay. Do we have anyone to step forward to speak to a claim? Okay. Any staff questions? All right.
I
Next.
have one.
Oh, go ahead.
We had, go ahead, come on.
Jeff Kirkpatrick, Lincoln City Attorney.
So we received an email from Dolores Hornung on her claim from March 2016 about $935 that had come from a result of a fire truck backing up and hitting her. She said her story via the email. I just wanted to get the city staff response to that. I don't know if you saw the email or not.
I did see the email, and I did have a chance to review the file. I would say that we do not disagree with her general factual allegations. The question is, in this case, where you had an accident, you had a fire truck that responded, she was following the fire truck, went around the vehicles that were stopped. The fire truck then started backing up into her. And I guess the position of the law department would be that it may well be that the fire truck, the LFR employee, the city has some liability. What we would suggest, however, that it's not 100% liability, that when she followed the fire truck around those two cars, and then when she did not react when the fire truck started backing up, that maybe there was some liability on that part as well. So we're asking for a denial. It's not a huge claim, but I suspect we'll be continuing to visit with her insurance company about this claim.
So is that how this works then? We deny it and they come back to us in some other form or fashion, or?
They could come back to the law department. If you went against the law department recommendation and you approved the claim, the city would then pay the entire amount. We would not be in the position to negotiate and suggest that perhaps there is some shared liability.
Okay, if we put it back on the pending list, would it give you the ability to negotiate with her?
Well, if you deny the claim, it could be we'll be coming back in front of you at a later date with the same claim,
Okay.
asking for permission to pay perhaps a part of it. Or it could be that we will not negotiate well and we'll come back and ask you to approve the entire claim. But at this point, we felt that the best thing to do was to ask you to deny the claim and then continue with our discussion.
So if we deny a claim, that person can come back with another claim on the same item on the same incident?
Well, they could file.
Okay.
They could file suit, and we could, based upon that, settle that without having to come back in front of you. Or if there's a discussion prior to them actually filing suit, then it's based on the original claim. And I think we'd add that to the claim report, even though the claim had been denied in the first place, just because we would be notifying you of the resolution of the claim.
Okay.
It's an unusual situation.
Yeah.
Usually we get these resolved prior to coming for you for denial or approval.
Just haven't seen one like this before, so thought I'd ask.
I don't know that I have either.
Yeah.
John?
Mr. Patrick, just to save time, administrative costs and everything, your staff's time, could I make a motion to approve a $475 payment subject to her acceptance? And that way we just be done with it, and they can take it or leave it?
You could certainly do that. That would be giving us directions.
To have this keep coming, it just takes administrative time, and you can either.
Well, we have to administer it. I mean, we have to negotiate with them regardless, and if they file suit, obviously, we have to deal with them in court or try to resolve it without going to court. I appreciate what you're trying to do. I'm not sure it'll save time or not. It's certainly something that this council could do, though.
It's either that, or I'd be in favor of just putting it on pending, but if I were to make that motion, would I just exempt it from the overall motion and then separately make a motion to offer her $475?
Yes, I think that would be the clearest way of doing it.
Okay.
Any other questions? Go ahead. Cindy.
Can you explain a little bit more about the comparative negligence statute that work, because it's not 100% or nothing, right?
Right. Under Nebraska, current statute has been for a number of years, although it changed within my lifetime. So not that long ago. Used to be it was all or nothing. I mean, if you were the one side had to be found 100% over 50% liable, and you got paid the entire claim, or you got paid nothing. With the comparative liability statute that we operate under, you can be held partially responsible. And that's really our analysis in this case, is that we believe that we have some liability. We backed up into this woman's car. We believe she has some shared liability. So we think what is more appropriate is we pay part of her damage rather than 100%.
And at this point in time, you haven't had those negotiations, or you have?
We haven't resolved those negotiations.
Okay, because I see it's the insurance company that's actually coming as subrogation interest, correct?
Yes.
Okay, and so.
And the claim is actually, yes, the claim was actually coming from the insurance company.
Yeah, and
But-
I guess
but
I'm a little
it-
more concerned it'll cost more to let this go to litigation before we do some kind of negotiation that ends up in settlement for 50% or whatever. And so I think I would probably be in favor of putting this back on pending than voting it up or down either way. I think once we vote it down, as I understand it, once we vote it down, then they can take it, file right away, and then we have to defend.
They certainly can. And as you're well aware as a practicing attorney in this area, it's always an assessment on our part and on the insurance company's part as far as cost-benefit analysis. Can we get this resolved in part? It's a little bit different in this case because the $500, the majority of the claim, because it's the deductible, is the driver. And then to work it out with the insurance company. But I think both sides have some interest in getting it resolved efficiently.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay. Any further discussion on this item? All right. Next item, Teresa.
All right, next is item 41, special permit 16022, application of Joshua Nix for a licensed early childhood care facility, including a waiver to the parking design standards on property generally located at 6519 Colby Street.
Is there anyone here wishing to speak to this item? Staff, could you please come forward?
David Carey with the City County Planning Department.
Okay. Did anyone else have questions for David, or do you want to explain a little bit about this item for us, please?
Yeah, I think maybe it would be best to explain the waiver, just because that's maybe more of interest than anything else. This is a fairly straightforward small operation daycare that's being proposed to be used in an existing home, and it would be just a daycare actually taking place there, up to 8 children, and I think it's up to 3 staff. The waiver is for access for this use using the existing alley, and the reason for the position of the staff to be supportive of the waiver is simply that it's a small operation. The existing access is from that alley, so it wouldn't be changing the conditions that are out there already. And also with the limited staff, that they would only be required to provide additional couple parking spots, and they can do that on the site, off the alley, using a new graveled area. And some background information on the the regulation here for the design standard to not normally allow access for daycares off of alleys is that in the past, we did some research and we found out that it was because there was a request for a much larger operation to be crossing an alley, providing for parking and drop off on the other side of the alley. And that was found to be too much of an inconvenience and potential safety issue. This is not nearly that case, so we were comfortable with the proposed waiver.
Given that there was some conclusion among your staff that maybe what was in the design standards was too broad, is it possible to refine that language so that we don't have this confusion in the future? Because, again, nothing in the design standards said anything about the size of the daycare being the justification. It was really this idea of not having young children crossing an alley.
Right, yeah, and that was a good point to be brought up. Certainly we can look into that. The good news is that we don't have all that many of these types of applications, but clarification would be helpful, so we can indeed follow up on that.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Would anyone else like to speak to this item? Okay, Teresa, next item, please.
All right, next is item 42, ordering construction of sidewalks along the west side of 48th Street from Holdridge to Layton Street where sidewalks currently do not exist.
Good afternoon, City Council members. I'm Mickey Esposito, Director of Public Works and Utilities. And as you know, this sidewalk request, actually construction, order and construction of the sidewalk, we're working with very closely with UNL. And we need and are requesting about a 6 to 8 week delay on this item so that we can continue our negotiations with the university to see if we can come up with a recommendation that would be good for all parties. Any questions?
So we can do that during the voting session, right?
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you.
Would anyone else like to speak to this item? Okay, seeing no one, next item, please, Teresa.
All right, next we'll move on to our public hearing ordinance's second reading. Item 43, ordinance authorizing and providing for the issuance of not to exceed 6.3 million aggregate stated principal amount of general obligation storm sewer and drainage system bonds of the City of Lincoln, Nebraska.
Good afternoon, Steve Hupka, City Finance Director. With me today is Mike Rogers, Bond Counsel from Gilmore & Bell, and Scott Keene from Emeritus Investment Corp., our financial advisor on this particular issue. As you well know, these are the bonds that were authorized by the voters at the May election. We're getting ready to issue those. We need this ordinance to be passed in order to do that. I'll just cover one piece of information here. An estimate of the debt service, roughly $400,000, and that's equivalent to 2.3 cents on the tax rate, or roughly $3.45 on a $150,000 valuation. That'll depend, of course, on the sale of the bonds and the final valuations from the county assessor later on, but that should be a relatively close estimate. And with that, I think I'll turn it over to Scott and Mike. They can cover the bond. Scott can cover the market itself. Mike can cover the ordinance that's before you.
Thanks, Steve. Scott Keene, Emeritus Investment Corp. The numbers that Steve just provided are based on the current market conditions of a true interest cost of approximately 2.3%. So we're still in a very, very favorable interest rate environment for this type of financing. To get 20-year financing done at 2.3% is pretty phenomenal. We are scheduled to meet with Standard & Poor's this Wednesday to discuss this financing. We fully expect that they'll be affirming the city's AAA rating on its unlimited tax general obligation bonds. We're planning to hold a competitive sale of these bonds on June 28th and settle the bond issue and deliver the proceeds to the city 2 weeks later. So we're on a pretty fast track with this financing, but want to try to take advantage of the current market conditions, and which are, again, very, very favorable. Happy to answer any questions. Otherwise, I'll just turn it over to Mike to talk about the ordinance.
Mike Rogers, Bond Counsel, Gilmore & Bell. The ordinance in front of you is the same format as other general obligation bond ordinances you've seen in the past. And you might note that it specifically includes attachment 1A, which is the same attachment and itemized listing of projects to be financed with proceeds of the bonds that was attached to the resolution adopted in February calling the bond election. Otherwise, the ordinance authorizes, sets certain parameters within which the bonds must be sold, and authorizes the levy of taxes to pay debt service on the bonds.
Questions? John?
During our previous discussion on this stormwater bond, we had talked about itemizing the projects, which we've done here. And then I'm trying to remember, did we say that if it was to go to other categories, it would come before the council before it was spent? Or how did we resolve that? Just trying to remember.
I believe that was stricken.
My recollection was that any excess was going to go into this, well, no, I'm sorry, I don't remember exactly how it was going to be spent. Yeah.
I thought that was stricken.
I don't remember how that discussion went, sorry.
I thought it was limited, as I recall, it was limited to these, but not other projects. There was something without city council approval.
That's right.
Oh, to go,
Came up with some language for us, I think, that night.
yes, to go beyond the listed projects to other projects that might not be listed on attachment 1A.
Is that what?
That's what you're?
That's
what
what it said.
Okay.
Yes, that's correct.
So is that covered in some form in here?
No, well, the ordinance authorizes the bonds to be, bond proceeds to be spent on the items listed on attachment 1A. And so to get that changed, there would need to be an amendment later on to the ordinance. So it would need to come back before city council. Or it would need to be a further authorization for expenditure of bond proceeds beyond the list on attachment 1A.
So if these projects took 6 million instead of 6.3, the other 300,000, what?
It serviced the debt, right?
This city staff could come back and ask for permission to spend that on other projects that aren't listed on attachment 1A, so long as they're for improvements or betterments to the city's stormwater system.
So as long as we're comfortable, it's reflecting that in all the language. Okay.
Any further questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Would anyone else like to speak to these items? This item? Jeff, do you want to come up and just confirm do you recall the council discussion and what was put in the?
Yeah, that would follow my understanding of it, that because the bond proceeds are not approved for any other project, you would have to have council approval for the bond proceeds before they could be spent.
Okay.
And I would suppose, although I haven't really thought through it in any detail, if this council did not approve any other projects, then they would just go to the proceeds, would go to early paying off the bonds. I don't think that the city staff could proceed to spend that money without council approval.
Okay, Jane.
I thought we had the discussion that there would maintain this flexibility for these projects in the bond as all other bonds, but these are the projects that the bond would be spent forward. So going back to, I think, John's question, if one of the projects came in at a lower amount and one of the other projects came at a higher amount, we have the authority and there is the flexibility within the bond itself to allocate it to appropriately to these designated items.
If you're talking within the approved projects, that's certainly true, yes. Okay. I had understood if all of the projects were paid for and there was money left over. That was the circumstance we were talking about.
Okay. Thank you for the clarification. Thank you. Okay. All right. Teresa, next item, please.
All right, next then, I'll call items 44 and 45. They are street and alley vacation 16001, vacating a portion of the North 50th Street public right-of-way between the south right-of-way line of St. Paul Avenue and the north right-of-way line of Baldwin Avenue, and pre-existing special permit 23H, application of Nebraska Wesleyan University to amend the special permit to include a new 75,000 square foot science building, including a waiver of the 35-foot maximum height restriction, include associated parking, and expand the special permit boundary to accommodate additional off-street parking for the university on property generally located at North 50th and Huntington Avenue.
Good afternoon, members of the council. My name is Tom Houston, 233 South 13th Street, Suite 1900 here in Lincoln. Appearing before you today on behalf of Nebraska Wesleyan University. With me today is President Fred Oles from Nebraska Wesleyan, and also Tish K. Jones, the Vice President of Finance. The two items on your agenda related to the new science building for Nebraska Wesleyan. On the overhead, I did have a depiction or architectural rendering. The facility is an approximately 75,000 square foot building containing 3 stories, really providing Nebraska Wesleyan the opportunity to expand its educational programs to meet the 21st century needs of its students. Item number 1 on your agenda deals with the amendment of special permit number 23H. The special permit was approved in 1994. Obviously, Nebraska Wesleyan's been around a lot longer than that, but it's a pre-existing use in that residential neighborhood that is authorized under the special permit. The specifically, the amendments to the special permit show the location of the new science building in approximately 50th Street between the right-of-way of St. Paul and Baldwin. It shows the expansion of some additional parking areas to the north and to the south, and also to the southwest of the new science building. Those are the primary amendments to the special permit. The comprehensive plan of the City of Lincoln encourages the expansion of educational facilities as long as they're done within and with some sensitivity to the existing neighborhood. In 2004, the City of Lincoln adopted what was known as the North 48th University Place Plan, where Nebraska Wesleyan was specifically asked not to expand to the north, not to expand to the south, but if they, in their growth needs, to expand to the west, and that's consequently why this new science building is being located where it is. The special permit request includes a height waiver for the structure to permit the height to be increased above the 35-foot minimum to the 46-foot. That height of the building is similar to existing facilities within the campus, and for the First United Methodist Church across the street north, we've asked that the city to vacate 50th Street, which allows us the opportunity to locate the building further to the east to decrease any negative impact that may have otherwise existed for the properties on the west. With regard to the parking, with the addition of the parking areas that you see, and you should have in your packet a motion to amend, and that motion modifies paragraph 3A. The primary thing that the motion to amend on the site-specific conditions will allow us to do is allows us to retain one of the aisles of parking. And like most university campuses, parking's at a premium, and we're trying to maintain every parking stall that we can. As a net gain, we're recognizing approximately 13 additional parking stalls as a part of this project. The second item on your agenda really relates to the street vacation. The university really considered this to be a 100-year decision. It was not made lightly. The location of the building within the right-of-way between St. Paul and Baldwin is done primarily with the view for the long term. It's going to be an expensive decision by the university because it does require the relocation of existing utilities within the 50th Street right-of-way and reconstruction of 2 intersections. But it increases pedestrian connectivity and pedestrian safety. There'll be thousands of students accessing the science building for Nebraska Wesleyan. The location of the facility in this area also allows us to decrease any negative impact upon the First United Church across the street to the north. It allows us to preserve additional parking, which, as I mentioned, is highly valued within a university setting, and also allows the university an opportunity to create more of a quad arrangement with the old main that exists to the east of this facility. I want to spend just a moment to talk about the process that Nebraska Wesleyan undertook for this facility. It was in March of 2015 when they first started having meetings with the First United Methodist Church, with the University Place Community Organization, with the immediate neighbors within the area. And over the next 10 to 12 months, there was 12 meetings that were held, 4 with the University Place Community Organization and the neighbors, and 8 meetings with the First United Methodist Church. Those meetings really resulted in the church and the university signing a memorandum of understanding to deal with issues of common interest, primarily parking, growth areas, traffic, those kinds of things. And I believe that Pastor Moffat's here to talk to you about some of those issues. In your packet, or at least in the packet before the Planning Commission, there's also 9 letters of support from individuals and businesses within the area. So 12 months later, after that first meeting, Nebraska Wesleyan was in front of the Planning Commission, where the Planning Commission recommended approval of both items on a unanimous basis. And Nebraska Wesleyan really is a cornerstone institution for the city of Lincoln, and primarily in the northeast area and University Place neighborhood, as Nebraska Wesleyan has the opportunity to expand its operations to really meet the educational needs of its students. This project will play a vital role in that, and Nebraska Wesleyan looks forward to working with the neighbors and all the institutes or all the other stakeholders involved to make sure that this facility is done correctly. I would ask for your support and support of both the amendment to the special permit and the vacation of 50th Street, and I'd be happy to try to answer any questions that you may have.
Any questions for Tom?
I'll leave my maps up here. They may need to speak to them.
Well,
thank you.
Okay.
Good afternoon, Fred Oles. I reside at 1010 Piedmont Road, Lincoln, Nebraska 68510. I'm coming to you as president of Nebraska Wesleyan University, asking for your support of these measures. Nebraska Wesleyan today is growing, thriving, and contributing to the city of Lincoln. Regarding our growth, we now teach 2,100 students on a regular basis. We've added master's degrees, particularly in recent years, an MBA 2 years ago that's thriving, a Master of Education degree that started last week. In the years 1993 to 2003, we built residence halls and a recreation and athletic facility that filled the 52 acres that had been set aside for Nebraska Wesleyan in the year 1887. So it's taken us 129 years to be prepared to come to the city and ask that we adjust the perimeter. It was in 2003 and about that time frame that Mr. Houston talked about the city master plan that asked us to grow west and hence the placement of the proposed building. Regarding our thriving, it's my impression that an organization such as ours will shape the change that's coming, or else the changes that come anyway will shape us in some other way. We are excited about this new building. It is the most important thing we could do to sustain the excellence for which our educational programs are known. Regarding our contribution to the city of Lincoln, Nebraska Wesleyan University has a payroll of $24 million. I would say we are both engine and anchor of a thriving University Place community. I'm very grateful to First United Methodist Church, to UPCO, and to local businesses for the support they have provided. Our ability to grow our campus with this new building will grow our ability to contribute to the city of Lincoln. I thank you, and I'd be glad to answer your questions.
Questions? All right. Thank you. Would you like to speak? Thank you.
Name is Lawrence A. Moffitt. I live at 5324 Madison Avenue, 68504, and I'm the pastor of First United Methodist Church. I just wanted to let the council know that after a long period of conversations, our church council voted unanimously to be in support of this plan. We are deeply appreciative of the fact that we now have a memorandum of understanding with our sister organization across the street, Nebraska Wesleyan University, about parking and a variety of other related issues on how we can live together in a very intentionally designed urban neighborhood, and we're very supportive of this. There are a couple things that you might enjoy knowing. Some of you probably already know this. The same people started Nebraska Wesleyan University and First United Methodist Church and the city of University Place before it was annexed by Lincoln. Although the organizations have been separate from the very beginning. And there have been periods of time in which there's been a lot of cooperation and almost a seamless movement back and forth across 50th Street, including pastors who ended up serving as chancellors of Nebraska Wesleyan and chancellors who ended up serving as pastors of First Methodist Church. Dr. David Mickey, who was longtime professor of history for Nebraska Wesleyan and an active member at First United Methodist Church, recently passed. We celebrated his life a week ago, Friday. One of the things that Dr. Mickey said as historian who wrote the book about the history of that whole section of now Lincoln was, we've never had a problem with separation of church and state in University Place because we've never tried it. That's a kind of a good insight as to the day-to-day working relationship that we treasure with our friends at Nebraska Wesleyan University. The Memorandum of Understanding includes a variety of things that include shared parking, which is a continuing concern in the whole neighborhood, as you might guess, and some opportunities for zones of growth for both Nebraska Wesleyan University and for First Church as we try to engage the future and make sure that there's a viable congregation there as also a part of the anchoring of the University Place. And I'd be glad to answer any questions you have if you.
Cindy.
Thank you. Hi, Pastor. Thanks for being here today. So, as I understand it, there's some students even over at Wesleyan that have a good interaction with maybe some of the folks that attend United Methodist. Could you tell the council a little bit about that?
Sure. We have a variety of Nebraska Wesleyan students and UNL students that are either interns or volunteers in a variety of ministries at First Church, including people who just come to worship. But we have in our music ministry, we have a number of musicians that are students at Nebraska Wesleyan as well as UNL that are part of our music ministry. We have a number that work with our youth ministry, which is a neighborhood youth ministry that involves about 100 students, middle school and high school students from the neighborhoods around First Church and Nebraska Wesleyan. And there's about an equal number of students from both Nebraska Wesleyan and UNL that are part of that youth ministry under the direction of Matt Borland, our Director of Youth Ministries. And then one of the most innovative programs of all is a tutoring program that is sponsored by Guidance to Success, Angelo Stabler, who is a graduate of Nebraska Wesleyan University, and he brings to the church on most Tuesday nights during the school year about 70 or so younger students that are elementary and early middle school age students. Those tutors that work with him are all Nebraska Wesleyan students. The people of the church furnish food, and it was former Mayor Colleen Singh who organized the food serving part of that because we knew where there were that many young people involved, there was going to have to be food that'd be culturally sensitive as well. So those are some of the tips of the iceberg and the ways in which students and life of the church and life of the university intertwine.
Thank you.
You bet.
Other questions? Thank you. Would anyone else like to come and speak in favor of this item?
Normally this is David Landis, Urban Development Department. Oftentimes we're the applicant. We are not in this case, but our department has the Housing, Rehab, and Real Estate Division, and we provide the valuation for the street or alley vacation that appears in your material, and I just wanted to make myself available. Normally you would see Clint Thomas, a certified general appraiser, but he's not here today, and I'm just batting cleanup for him, and our material is part of your packet.
Any questions? Go ahead, Carl.
I'm not sure if this question's for Dave or Mr. Houston or who exactly, but I'm wondering about parking and how this project impacts parking for the church, for the university, for the neighborhood. So who can help me there?
And I'm not the applicant in this case, and I'm just delighted not to be. I'm going to turn that to Tom Houston.
Tom? Yeah.
Unless you want people to testify first, I can address that during rebuttal, perhaps.
Okay.
Okay. Would anyone else like to testify in favor of this item? Okay. Anyone like to testify in opposition? Okay. None?
Form over substance, I guess. Tom Houston on behalf of the university. One thing about this project, it is not really directly intended to lead to student population growth. It's really intended to provide additional programming for the approximately 2,000 to 2,200 students that are in attendance at Nebraska Wesleyan. And that's why careful attention was paid to the site plan to try to make sure that we grew parking where possible. There's some existing parking areas that are being reconfigured and expanded. For example, this is an existing parking lot north of the location of the science building in the 50th Street right-of-way. This parking lot will be reconfigured and expanded to the north. Likewise, down south, this smaller parking lot exists today. It will be expanded and enhanced to the south. And this area over here, as shown by the southwest corner, this area on the site plan itself is being expanded to parking. So we are expanding parking opportunities, not anticipating student growth per se as a part of the project, but trying to accommodate what we see as increased traffic because of the attention to the science building itself.
Thank you.
One of the things you mentioned was about how this is really a long-term decision, a 100-year decision. So it's great to be thinking long-term about the plan for Wesleyan's growth towards the west. Given that, was there some discussion about the placement of the building relative to those future plans in the next 100 years as opposed to what's there on the west right now?
Yeah.
And whether or not it made sense to keep 50th Street open to allow, some of that rare north-south access for the neighbors and for people, to help take pressure off of North 48th. Can you speak to the decision not to have it a little further to the west?
Well, one of the primary things that we're focusing on is it had some adverse effects, for example, on shadowing on the church and sightlines on the church. And the church is historic and unique, and I was fascinated to be in it because it has some very unique architectural features. But the location further to the east within the right-of-way helped protect some of the sightlines to the church, and that was a strong consideration. One of the things that came out of the negotiation between the church and the university was the importance of the through traffic on St. Paul Avenue and on Baldwin Avenue. And those were the primary links to the major arterial 48th Street. So it was really designed to make sure that we have unhindered traffic and circulation to the major arterial for the long-term traffic needs of the city. Not trying to focus on taking away anything on 50th Street, because traffic will still exist on 50th Street. But it will be linked to 48th Street because of St. Paul and Baldwin. And that, I think both the church and the university agreed those are the keys for the long term on helping manage the traffic within the neighborhood. Recognizing that as the university campus expands, it's not unlike many institutional campuses that we have, whether it's hospital or educational or retail, that we have block length issues. But I think the comprehensive plan acknowledges that and encourages growth of contiguity within a campus area like this. The long-term needs of the students and the safety needs of the pedestrian nature of the student population, we think long-term is the right way to go here. And that's why 50th Street was being ultimately selected as the location for the building.
Okay. Was there any sort of traffic analysis that was required for this project in terms of the impact on travel on North 48th?
No, there really wasn't. We were cognizant of the existing traffic on 50th Street, but we determined it was primarily internal. It was primarily internal to and from the church. And part of the memorandum of understanding with the church tries to accommodate that traffic to and from the church because of the parking lots, because of access to all the other parking areas that are going to be designed as a part, or really built as a part of this project. So we tried to address those needs through the MOU in other ways.
We did get one letter of opposition, but from a member of UPCO, but what was UPCO's final stance on the project? It didn't seem that it had been resolved at the Planning Commission.
I understood that there was going to be a representative here today, but I was informed that University Place, the Board of Directors, did vote in the affirmative to support this project. Not without some concern, and their primary concern was the closure of 50th Street, but I think they ultimately concluded, because of the resolution of the issues with First Church and because of the necessity of making sure that Nebraska Wesleyan has the opportunity to expand. I believe that's why UPCO ultimately determined to move forward with their support.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Any further staff questions? Okay, Teresa, please call the next item.
Next then, I will call items 46 and 47. Application of Lancaster County, or change of zone 16010. Application of the County Board of Commissioners for a change from R4 residential to B3 commercial on property at 2201 South 17th Street, as well as the related development and conditional zoning agreement between the city and Lancaster County to restrict the use of the property under the proposed change of zone at 2201 South 17th Street.
Okay, would the applicant like to come forward and explain this item?
Thank you. Good afternoon, members of the City Council. My name is Todd Wilchin, Vice Chair of the Lancaster County Board of Commissioners, and I am testifying today on behalf of the County Board in favor of the change of zone 16010. The main structure located at the property in question is commonly referred to as the Community Mental Health Center building. This building has served the interests of Lincoln and Lancaster County for several decades. The Lincoln-Lancaster County Health Department was located here from 1965 until 1994. In 1976, the newly created Lancaster County Community Mental Health Center began occupying the second floor of the building. When the health department moved to its present location in 1994, the Community Mental Health Center moved to the first floor, and the second floor was remodeled to accommodate the Lancaster County Crisis Center. In 2012, the county board decided to stop operating the Community Mental Health Center as a county agency. Following a request for proposals issued by Region 5 Systems, Lutheran Family Services was selected to provide the behavioral health services previously provided at by the county. A lease agreement was entered into between Lutheran Family Services and the county, allowing them to remain in the building. In accordance with the city zoning requirements, Lutheran Family Services received a special permit number 14001 to operate non-residential healthcare facility at this location. Now, Lutheran Family Services is no longer in the facility, and the Crisis Center will be moving out within the next few weeks across 9th Street over in the Benish building. Since the Community Mental Health Center building is no longer needed for county purposes, the county board has decided to declare the property surplus and put it up for sale. By statute, the county is required to hold a public hearing where interested parties can speak for or against the sale and raise issues regarding the fair market value of the property as determined by the county board. The board is then required to set a sale for the property within 2 months of the public hearing. If no bids are received, or if the bids are substantially below market value, the county is then free to lease or sell the property if in the best interest of the county. The stage is now set for why Lancaster County is seeking a change in zone for the property R4 to B3. For many years, the city and the county have enjoyed the full use of the Community Mental Health Center building. As the county prepares to sell the property, the board owes a duty to its property taxpayers to sell the property for its maximum value. However, parking requirements in the R4 zoning restrict the usable space in the Community Mental Health Center building from 35,003 square feet to 31,800 square feet. This change results in a substantial reduction in the market value of the property of almost $635,000. A recent appraisal commissioned by the board valued the building at R4 at $2.5 million. A B3 zoning would result in a value of $3,185,000. The Community Mental Health Center building has been heavily utilized throughout its entire history with little impact on the nearby neighborhood. Since the county taxpayers have always enjoyed the full use of the building, it makes sense that their elected representatives should be able to value and sell the property based on its full usage. Changing the zoning to B3 allows the county to utilize the entire space in the building when establishing fair market value of the property. The county board is mindful of the concerns that some of the uses allowed under B3 zoning could result in a negative consequences to the near south neighborhood. However, the county's only interest in requesting B3 zoning is to allow full usage of the existing building for valuation and selling purposes. And the county is willing to accept all reasonable conditions limiting how the property can be used under B3 zoning. Under this scenario, the future usage of the property will remain very similar to its past usage, and there will be no significant increase in the impact on the surrounding area. The county is also aware that an argument has been made that the county has contracted away its right to seek a change in zone on the property because of an agreement entered into between Bryan Lincoln General Hospital and the county in 2007 in exchange for parking lots. This argument is without merit and will be addressed fully by Carrie Egan, the County Board's Chief Administrative Officer, following my testimony. At this time, I would be happy to answer any questions.
So your appraisal assessed full market value, but you're going to like a bidding type situation, so you could see a completely different slate of, I mean, you're auctioning it off essentially.
Right. So the way the process in the state law, we have to go and obtain an appraisal, and then based on that, we use that to determine the fair market value. And so when, at that time, at the public sale, through the bidding process, if, and there's been some conjecture on who the buyer would be, but we don't have the ability to negotiate with anyone. We have the process in which we get the appraisal, we put it up for public sale, and then if none of the bids come in close to the fair market value, then at that point we can negotiate.
So you have your assessment of fair market value, you do your bidding process, and let's say no one comes in and bids at the 3.1 or the 2.5, whatever zoning you get.
Right. If we leave it at 2.5 million and someone comes in and bids $2 million, then that comes before the county board, and then we have the option to either accept that low bid or we can reject it and then negotiate with anyone, not necessarily the bidder.
Wouldn't that person that came forward or entity that came forward to buy the building, would they have the ability to come back in front of us to change the zone as well?
That would be up to the planning commission and the council.
Okay. I'm good.
Other questions? At planning commission, what the majority of the planning commissioners concluded was that were this a different applicant, were this not the county, coming forward to change the zoning in preparation for a sale, that they would likely say no. What do you say to that argument of, is this special treatment for a municipality?
Well, I would say that, again, those other applicants are not subject to the same state law we are. I've had multiple conversations with individuals in the private commercial real estate business, and they are all, they do not understand this process. But again, this is something that we as a county have to follow. It's not something that if we were in the private sector, we would be able to do. So that would be my answer, which is, again, as a county, we're responsible. Do what's in the best interest of the county taxpayers.
Cindy.
So what I hear you saying is that because it is the county that owns the property, you have to go through this procedure, which requires getting the valuation and going to a public auction, if you will, before you can actually negotiate. where if it was another entity that wasn't a government, that they could already be in negotiations and trying to get the best price with somebody who may be wanting to rezone it at a later time or something of that nature. Is
That's
that right?
correct, yes. So if we were a private entity, we could forego the appraisal process and go straight to negotiations. And then it would really, I guess, be up to the new property owner to obtain the appraisal if he needed to get financing. But in this case, we do have to get the zoning situation resolved prior to the public sale.
And immediately north of this building is where the old Sunmart used to be, and that's zone B3, is that correct?
Right, yeah, I do have a map. So if you can see, currently, yes, the area shaded in blue is the area that we're talking about. The area shaded in orange is the current property owned by the hospital. And then, yeah, the green area is the former Econo Foods along South Street. And that is zoned B3. And the current hospital is zoned at R4, which is similar to what our property currently is zoned.
I just wanted to follow up and clarify my question, then Carl has a question, then Roy has a question. So what you're saying basically is that because the county as a municipality has different rules that it has to follow, has different restrictions on its ability to negotiate or act independently, that it should not be treated the way a private developer would be treated, that it should have a different opportunity.
I mean, we're subject to a different state law. I mean, we as the public entity are subject to state law that requires us to have a completely different process. And that's what we have to follow. And so we're asking the city council to change the zoning to allow us to move forward in our process so that we can, again, achieve what is in the best interest of the county taxpayers, which is the highest possible sale of the property. An important thing to note, though, is that the proceeds from the sale of this building will be used to offset the construction bonds for the Benish building. So right now, by reducing the zoning or the value based on zoning, we have the potential for losing those proceeds that the county taxpayer would end up having to pay through rent, through the Public Building Commission for the new crisis center.
Okay. Carl, then Roy.
Okay. Todd, you gave a couple of estimates of value under different zoning options. There's also been a suggestion that maybe this should be zoned O2, I believe. Do you have a figure on what that would have been?
We do not, but I think, again, the reason is that, I mean, going back to the map, I mean, the B3 is the adjacent property, the R4. So creating a third different zoning for this area, I think, again, we could accomplish the same outcome by allowing the B3 with the additional restrictions, whether that be restrictions on retail. But you can achieve, I mean, the same type. But again, it's the value for the purposes of sale that we're concerned about.
Okay, so Todd, let me just walk through this, and you correct me if I'm wrong at any point here. Let's say we take action, and the evaluation that you're going to use when you put it out for bid is $3.1 million. And you get a bid of $3.2 million. At that point, because you've met the expectation, you're going to have to take that bid, correct?
Correct.
And there's no negotiation afterwards unless you come in below that bid, that valuation number. Is that correct?
Let me grab the law. By definition, if the county board receives no bids, or if the bids received are substantially lower than the fair market value, the county board The county board may negotiate a contract for sale or lease of the real estate if such negotiated contract is in the best interest of the county.
Okay.
And that is Nebraska Revised
So-
Statute 23-107.01.
So is this an open bid process?
It's a, I mean, it's basically it's a sheriff's sale. I mean, it's a public, yeah, sale.
Any other questions? Jake, and then John.
Todd, did you want to explain that again? Are you saying that it doesn't matter if it's B3 or if it's O2, but with the B3 that the county is proposing, it would be the same with the conditions that the county has agreed to put on that B3 zoning? Pretty much?
I mean, essentially, yes.
But a B3 zoning allows greater value or enhanced value to the property.
Correct, and it really comes down to the parking. If you look at the way the property is laid out, there's an issue involving the parking for an O2 designation. But again, it goes back to the limits on the square foot usage for R4.
So the B3 zoning would give a greater parking lot ratio that would allow greater parking on the property than in O2.
Right.
So if you...
Property zoned at R3 is not as, or property zoned at O2 is not as valuable as property zoned at B3.
Because of the
Can I make a correction there so you understand? The parking is going to be the same amount of parking. So you're not increasing the parking with the zoning. What you're doing is increasing the opportunity to utilize the internal space of the building for
entire
sale.
building.
Yep.
Okay.
Any other questions? John, that's right.
I have kind of a subjective question. You mentioned your responsibility on behalf of the taxpayers is to get the maximum value you can out of the property and appreciate the rent and so forth we paid on the new facility with the building commission. Is there something of a community responsibility in this whole matter because of the nature of the adjacent hospital facility and all to maybe work on a compromise?
And again, we're not able to do that. I mean, as a county, that's not part of the law that we can follow. The process is laid out very clearly, which is we've not negotiated with any parties. Our process is put the building up for sale and then go from there. We're not able to, and I know what you're referring to, but we're just not able to negotiate it. Doing so would be a violation of state law.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions for Todd? Okay, thank you. Would anyone else like to come forward and speak in favor of this item?
Good afternoon, members of the City Council. My name is Kerry Egan. I'm the Chief Administrative Officer for the Lancaster County Board of Commissioners. The purpose of my testimony is to address an agreement that was entered into between Lancaster County and the Bryan Medical Center in 2007 and how that agreement might affect the right of the county to request this change of zone. If I may take a moment, though, I would like to try to answer a question posed by Commissioner, Council Member Gaylord Baird, I can say that. Yes, are we creating a different standard because we're a public entity, so you're giving us greater consideration in considering a change of zone for our property kind of on a blanket basis? I would say the answer to that is no. You would look at each individual situation and judge it on its own merits. In this situation, the county has owned a building since 1961 approximately. It's been heavily used, fully utilized the entire life of that building. Now we're getting to a point that we want to sell the building, but we're told with the existing zoning that we can't get the full value of the building. It's going to be reduced. So if there's a private landowner who's in that same situation, that they've owned a building for as long as we have, since 1961, and they've had full use of the building, and all of a sudden they're going to sell it, and then all of a sudden you only get to get a partial value of your building because of the zoning. Well, how did they use the building all that time in the first place? So I think you have to look at each situation individually, and you can't generalize and say because we're the government we're getting a special consideration. I think you look at the merits of this case and you can't extrapolate it that we're somehow getting a better deal than the private sector. You'd have to look at what situations they were in the circumstances.
And just to clarify, I was repeating the conclusion of the planning commissioners and their likely vote should this have been a private developer coming
Right.
forward. I was asking him to respond to that.
Okay, and
that
that would be,
statement.
that would be my response to that statement, that it is a unique situation and should be judged on these facts and not how it might play to a, a hypothetical situation with a private property owner when we don't know the full circumstances in that situation. So, okay, back to my original purpose. This 2007 agreement between the county and Bryan has two main subjects. The first was a detailed agreement describing how Bryan will treat patients who are the responsibility of the county, general assistance patients, patients at the jail, and patients who are holding in emergency protective custody, and how the county will pay for those services. That was one big portion of that subject of that contract. A second section was an agreement for the transfer of ownership of real property between the parties. Essentially, pursuant to that section, the county transferred 126 parking stalls located to the west of Bryan, or to the west of the Community Mental Health Center to Bryan, and in exchange, Bryan transferred 102 stalls that were located to the southeast of the building to the county. We had, I think, 4 existing spaces over there already, so that gave us a total of 106 spaces on the other side. A copy of this agreement was introduced at the public hearing before the Planning Commission on May 11th, and so I'd ask the attorney, does that automatically become a part of the record on this hearing? Okay, so I won't bother reintroducing a copy of that contract, and that will be a part of the record. I also provided a copy to Cindy Lamb prior to the meeting, so if anyone would like to read the agreement, copies are available. An argument was made at the Planning Commission meeting on May 11th that when the county entered into this agreement, it somehow sold some of its property rights in exchange for services. In other words, this argument seems to be implying that the county specifically gave up the right to the full value of its building in exchange for favorable pricing for medical services from Bryan. However, the first thing you need to note is that this agreement, this agreement simply has no legal basis and should not be considered when deciding the merits of the county's request for a change of zone. First, this agreement has what's called an integration clause that provides the following. This agreement, including all schedules, represents the entire agreement and understandings of the party hereto, and all agreements, understandings, representations, and warranties, whether written or oral, in regard to the subject matter hereof are and have been merged herein. In the event of a conflict, the provisions of this agreement and the schedules of this agreement shall prevail. Nowhere in this agreement does the county agree to give up the full value of its building. If that was the intent of Bryan Medical Center when it entered into this agreement, that it's when we came back for a change of zone down the line to be able to use our full space, that should have been included in the language of agreement in the agreement. On the one hand, the argument seems to be assuming a direct negotiated sale between the county and Bryan, but as Commissioner Wilchin has explained, we do have this public process that we have to go through. So that agreement simply at this point would not be relevant to this public process. On the other hand, the argument also seems to be arguing that the neighbors are somehow have become a third-party beneficiary of this agreement, and if we're allowed to get the change of zone, they're going to see negative consequences that they should have been protected against because of this prior agreement between Bryan and the county. Again, there was the integration clause. It's the full agreement. Nowhere do we agree to give up the full value of our building in that agreement. So in conclusion, without this change of zone from R4 to B3, the county will lose a substantial portion of this building, the right to use a substantial portion of this building. Portions of this building that we've been using fully since the health department went in there. I think it was in 1966. And they were in there for about 19 years. So we did not convey away this right in the 2000 agreement. Bryan has not been paid directly for our right to give up a portion of the use of this building. And we believe very strongly that the interests of the taxpayers, that we are entitled to sell this building based on its full use. So the real issue that seems to be raised in all this and the warnings is it's going to have this terrible impact on the neighborhood. Well, we held a public hearing for the neighbors to come and look at it. We got virtually no attendance. Now, subsequent to that, there was a letter filed by the president of the association expressing concerns of additional impacts because of the broad B3. But with a carefully drawn zoning agreement, you can take care of those concerns. All the concerns of the neighbors can be adjusted. All of the uses under B3 that would be inconsistent can be addressed. The question was asked whether, does O2 zoning do the same thing? It simply does not, because the parking restrictions there, again, do not allow us the full value of the building. So our purpose in coming before the council on this change of zone is to allow us to essentially have the building continue to be operated the way it has for years and years and years. If it continues to be operated in that way, even with the full use of the building, the impact on the neighborhood really isn't going to change very much. So really that should be the concern, is what is going to be the impact. And with a carefully drawn agreement, we believe that the impact will be the same as the existing use. Another thing I should probably point out about that parking too is that this, while the county is kind of the odd part and the rest of this entire campus is owned by the hospital, there really, with that agreement, there were X number of parking stalls in that area before the agreement and X number of stalls afterwards, and that really, the agreement didn't change that. It didn't add any parking, didn't subtract any parking. And while we all jealously guard our parking, there is poaching that goes on, and I'm sure there's a lot of intermixture. So that agreement really did not reduce the amount of parking available to the people using that area at all. So with that said, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Cindy.
Thank you. Okay, so when we talk about the full use, I think what you're saying is that the county has had the full use of the facility as if it had all the parking spaces needed, correct?
Correct.
Okay, but this trade or giving part of the parking spaces up to Brian, it didn't change what the county did, or the full use by the county, right?
That's correct, yes.
But it now, because of zoning restrictions and the parking restrictions, that if it was, remains at an R4 or is changed to an O2, that there aren't enough parking spaces to support the full value for the building in those instances,
Yeah,
is that right?
in the manner to which it has been traditionally been used, that is correct.
Okay.
I should point out too that in that 2007 agreement, it was Bryan Hospital that approached the county. They really wanted that space in the middle. It was a big portion of their existing campus. It made a lot of sense for them to own that, and it made some sense for us to have our parking on the side too. We weren't looking as carefully at the numbers, although we did notice there's going to be a difference in value between 102 stalls and 120 stalls. But we were looking at it just as a parking exchange, and we looked at negotiating the services agreement really as a separate matter, that the two weren't tied together.
So, Mr. Wilchin had mentioned, Commissioner Wilchin mentioned the possibility of restricting use, changing it to a B4, but, excuse me, B3, but restricting the use as an O2?
I think the county board would be fine with that. We've had some discussions on it, and it really is the ability to use the full building and the parking that matters. If it, we would, I'm sure the county board would be very reasonable in any restrictions that would guard and protect the neighborhood in that regard, yes.
Thank you.
Carl.
Yeah, Mr. Egan, if you could clarify, I thought you just said there was a simple swap for different parking lots, but there was something else that the county received also in exchange for the parking lots, right?
Well, you look at the agreement for that, and that's why the agreement is in the record. And anything that's in the four corners of that agreement is the full agreement, and just then come back and say, now that the county gave up the right to use a portion of its building because of this agreement in 2007, it's simply not in the agreement. Now, we had a whole section that defines services that are provided, protocols, contact people, and very importantly, pricing. And that is outlined in the agreement too. But in exchange for that pricing and this protocol and how these services are provided, nowhere in that agreement does it say, oh, and the county gives up these substantial interests in its building in the future. That's simply not in the agreement, and it was never contemplated by the county that that would occur. And I'm not sure if it was contemplated by the hospital. If it was, it should have been in the four corners of that document.
Well, I think for clarification, it's not in that document because there wasn't a zone change, and it's only a limited use of the building depending on the zoning. With the R4 that you've been existing under, and maybe we'll have staff clarify this, but I think that's why that it's not mentioned in that document.
Well, there was no contemplation of the county selling the property at all at that time. It was simply an agreement in the best interests of Bryan and the best interests of the county at the time for changing parking lots and for arranging for some billing protocols and prices. I mean, that was the entire agreement.
Jean?
Gary, can you clarify that before that 2007 agreement, what was the rate that the county paid Bryan for services, for like general assistance, the jail services for inmates?
There's a lot of history on this, and obviously it was Lincoln General Hospital before it became Bryan Hospital. The entire time it was the public hospital. All of the county's patients were served at the Medicaid rate because county basically is paying for prisoners who cannot provide for medical care or general assistance for people who have no other resources available. So it's basically that type of patient. Also, some of the patients at the crisis center that are placed into emergency protective custody might not have the ability to pay, and they would get sick, and Bryan would treat them. And there became some, I guess, misunderstanding after the sale. Was the county's understanding that the new owner would continue the same practices as Lincoln General. In fact, there were a lot of concerns raised at the time that this is a public hospital that's being sold to a private entity. How do we know that the public interests are going to be protected in the same way? And it was intimated that that would continue as the same. But you know, Bryan's entitled to make its own decisions, and we did, I think, have a disagreement on what the value of those services was, and the 2007 agreement did address those and provided for the back pay of services that had been charged but not paid for, incurred but not paid for, and other things. So it was a very extensive agreement.
Has that agreement lapsed? Did it expire?
The agreement, well, the land sale was permanent. Mm-hmm. And so that's part, and it specifically says the Section 5 is permanent. The other section lasted for 5 years. It ran through 2013. At the end of that period, the agreement continues as if in full force and effect, but either party has the right to terminate it.
So in 2016, the county board is charged the Medicaid rate for general assistance.
Yes.
And okay.
We basically never paid anything other than the Medicaid rate for general assistance. I think the dispute was more on the EPC patients and the corrections inmate patients.
But the county pays the Medicaid rate
we pay the Medicaid
for reimbursement.
Rate, yes.
Okay.
And we think that's appropriate.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? Okay. Thank you, Carrie.
Thank you.
Would anyone else like to come and speak in favor of this item? Would anyone like to testify in opposition to this item?
Good afternoon. My name is Kent Seacrest, representing Bryan Health. Today, also testifying will be Kim Russell, President and Chief Executive Officer of Bryan Health. I'll be talking some planning concepts and concerns with you, and she will be addressing the public delivery service issues of this proposed rezoning. We will go fast, but we would request some extra time because we weren't planning on talking about the 2000 agreement, but it sure got brought up, and there's enough without it, but that has some other consequences. We want to be sure you understand fully the rest of that story, if we could. We believe, also in the audience today is David Reese, Vice President of Bryan Medical Center, and John Woodrich, President and Chief Operating Officer for Bryan Medical Center. They're also here to help answer any questions. We believe you do have three choices in front of you today. Option one is go with the B3 zoning request that the county has asked you to do. Option two is to follow the recommendation of the Planning Commission, which is to retain the R4 zoning and the special permit that allows a non-medical office use for that building. or 3, which is what we call the compromise, is the proposed O2 rezoning. The Planning Commission, as you maybe read in the record, did not support the council's recommendation or the county board's request for B3 zoning. In fact, it voted 6-2 to recommend denial of the county's request. The 6 commissioners indicated that they thought it was bad precedent to give a more intense zoning without knowing who the user was and what the potential use the user could propose. That you could still have the sale even under state law and then come back and ask for the rezoning. If the rezoning to retail or whatever was appropriate, the council could grant it at that time. And if it was not appropriate, then the council would not. Their thought was that you normally don't give zoning or permit zoning grants that are more intense without knowing what the use is. So that's why they felt it's important to go forward and communicate first what the plans are so that the neighbors would have notice to say whether or not that zone was correct. Interested citizens, the planning department, planning commission could weigh in before you would have to weigh in. Brian supports both. The planning commissions are for rezoning with a special permit that allows it to be a non-medical office building. And we also propose support the compromise. What we're not excited and are opposing is the B3 rezoning for the following reasons. First of all, and this is another part where I guess I'm a little bit confused, because I think I just heard Carrie say the county board would accept the O2 uses, but not the parking, but the O2 uses. If that's the case, some of my presentation goes out the door, because our main concern is the retail. And if they're now saying they would support the O2 uses and not the retail uses, I don't have to make some points here, but the retail uses, in case I didn't hear right, I better make my points. The retail uses are pretty intense that are allowed in the B3, section, and we just don't think these uses should be allowed near a hospital. Sexually oriented shops, billiards, smoke shops, e-cigarette shops, gun ammunition shops, and liquor stores. B3 allows these uses, as well as the other retail uses, to be 24 hours with drive-throughs. And again, we don't think that's appropriate next to a medical hospital. We believe, and this is probably the crux of the issue, is the parking issue. Lincoln has lots of commercial zones, and they all have a 1 per 300 parking, per 300 square feet of building parking stall requirement, except one, B3. It has half the parking requirements of any of the other commercial zones here today that is in front of you, that are choices. As a result, this means that if every business is successful, be it across the market, the B3 only gives half the parking stalls the parkers need, and the other half the parkers have to go park somewhere else, in Bryan lots or in the neighborhood, and we think both of those are not in the best interest of either neighbor here in this case. Compared to the other two zoning alternatives, the B3 has less setback protections, greater height, more intensity, bigger and more egregious type signs. There's no requirement in the B3 for site review. A lot of your commercial zones allow the site user to come in and propose and show whether or not the uses and the layout is detrimental to the neighborhood. We would not have that opportunity to make that type of review with you, because the B3 just is a pull the building permit type zone. We also think the B3 has already, the whole South Street corridor from 9th to 17th Street is already B3. And there's plenty of soft or underutilized B3 already there, and a lot of vacant B3. We just don't think the market's knocking on the door for more B3 retail type zone. And we think it's not fair to the existing B3 owners to have more competition when they're already struggling and probably not being successfully achieving what their goals are along the way. We also think you allowing B3 encourages more strip zoning, potentially up and down 9th Street, either way of South, or 13th Street, or 16th or 17th, because you're setting a precedent here. When you have an existing retail like B3 that's on South Street and you have an existing neighborhood zoning, if we talk transition, planners usually talk office as the transition zone, not more B3 up against the neighborhood. And I would just want to say a picture probably I think says it all. If you look at that building, if it shows up here,
There we go.
we think that has the attributes and perspective of office and not retail. So therefore, it's more appropriate to be office rather than retail. We never tried to say or infer at the Planning Commission that the county has given up their right to ask for B3 zoning. They have the rights, just like any other citizens, to ask for rezoning. What we were saying, though, is back in the 2007 agreement, they sold real estate that caused them to be in a pickle, which I think they're finding themselves in today, and we think it's been self-created, and they're asking you to help them resolve something that they gave up in 2007. Here's the medical office building, and before 2007, this was the health department's parking lot, or the county's building's parking lot, and they had 126 stalls. Carrie did a good job of explaining that in the 2007 they swapped it and got this 202 stalls, so they gave up 24 stalls. And Brian also, as part of that settlement, settled over $1.2 million of debt for $600,000. Lots of things went into that 2007 agreement, but the parking was one. And I think the part we would like to indicate to you is that before 2007, they met this community's traditional standard of 1 stall per 300. In fact, they had 10 extra stalls when they had this parking area. After the exchange, if they didn't have to comply with the standard because, you know, they're the county. But if they were to be the private sector, they would be found themselves short 10 stalls. So that's what's leading to the dilemma, is when you're short 10 stalls, the building and safety would normally say you have to give up equivalent part of your building, so your building does meet the parking standard of 1 parking stall per 300. And that's where they'd have to give up 9% of their building for purposes of turning it into storage to meet the community standard of 1 parking stall per 300. If you give them the B3, you are saying they can get by with half the parking that everybody else has to give, is required in the other commercial zones in this community, and we question that. And finally, I just would like to take 1 second and say the county, I believe, has more public purpose than just trying to maximize dollars for its constituents. I think that was maybe an overstatement, because they, like you, have a duty to protect the public's health, safety, and welfare of the community, and that's another word for zoning and police power. And so they need to, you know, do things that the comprehensive plan calls for and not cause problems for neighbors along the way, and be a good neighbor. And finally, there was mention that the county had a neighborhood meeting. Brian did not get notice of that meeting, nor did the neighborhood association. So I think that could be one of the reasons it was not well attended. Kim?
Good afternoon. My name is Kim Russell, 1600 South 48th Street in Lincoln, and I'm here today as the president and CEO of Bryan Health. Thank you for your time in listening to our concerns. When the city sold Lincoln General to Bryan, and that was back in 1997, Bryan made a deep commitment to this area of Lincoln, to the city core. Our constant goal at Bryan at that campus has been twofold. Number one, enhance the health services on that campus. And we have done so. I would love to give you about 2 hours worth of conversation about everything that's been added and expanded on that campus in recent years. And our second goal has been for that campus, Bryan West, to be a safe, secure, and stable anchor for the city core of Lincoln. So that's why I think this issue in front of the council is so much more than just zoning for this one building. I think it really has to do with what's happening in our city core. And that's obviously been a big issue in Lincoln these days, with this area of town getting a lot of interest. An example that I would use, I know that Lori Seibel has presented to the City Council on the mapping project. And recall that this was some research that Community Health Endowment funded that showed some of the highest need areas of our community. And immediately surrounding that Bryan West campus is some of the lowest lifespan areas of our community compared to the rest of Lincoln. This is a high need area, and this is one of the reasons why Bryan is so invested in what we're trying to do with this campus. Now, Mr. Egan used the term, he said the county building is the odd part of this campus. I couldn't agree more, and I'm going to ask Kent to put a map up there of the Bryan campus. So essentially, Kent, you want to point out the part that Bryan owns? Essentially, Bryan owns this entire area and some of the homes surrounding. And what's outlined in red is the county building and the parking that we're talking about. So it is indeed kind of an odd part. The Bryan campus surrounds this building, and that's exactly why we're so concerned about the zoning. We feel a tremendous duty to the safety and security of everyone stepping on that campus, be they a patient, a family member, a visitor, or our staff people. We do invest in 24/7 security on the Bryan campus, both internally and externally. In recent years, we've had to beef up that security. It is a constant challenge, and frankly, when the phone rings in the middle of the night, chances are it's going to be something related to the Bryan campus. We are very concerned if this building or property is converted to some of the potential uses for the B3, such as things involving drive-throughs, involving guns, cigarette sales. We believe that will greatly increase our challenge in providing safety and security on that campus. The parking has been greatly discussed. You know, my primary concern about parking is when a family member drives onto that Bryan West campus because their loved one has just been brought in to our trauma center and is in the operating room or in the intensive care unit. I do not want that family member to have to circle around and look for parking. And so that's why our concern is about perhaps having a neighbor that doesn't have enough parking to support whatever its business or its use might be. Another concern that I have is that the Bryan Independence Center is located on this campus. The Bryan Independence Center is our substance abuse treatment center, and it's located right there on Lake Street. Recall that a couple of years ago, we received many generous donations from the community, which was matched with funding from Bryan Medical Center, and we greatly expanded this service into a new and expanded building. I'm very concerned about potentially having this building be converted into a liquor store in that close proximity to the Bryan Independence Center. In addition to all those concerns, the fact of the matter is that our services are growing at Bryan West for a number of different reasons. We are seeing additional growth as related to because of growth in Lincoln, but also because we're receiving more patients from outside of Lincoln coming to Bryan West and Bryan East as well, but Bryan West for services. I could give you a whole another hour on that, on why people in rural areas of our state are coming to Lincoln for their medical services. That has required Bryan to open additional nursing and patient care units, which had previously been shuttered for many years. Even, for example, our Bryan College of Health Sciences, even though it's headquartered on Bryan East, we have, because of its growth, had to add classroom space at Bryan West for our Bryan College. So lots of growth is happening on that campus, which I believe is a very, very good thing to help achieve that goal of a stable neighborhood anchor. Because of all this growth, Bryan is in the midst of a long-range master facility plan. We did one of these in the 90s when Lincoln General became part of the Bryan family, and now we're undergoing another planning process to be able to really plan the campus needs for both Bryan East and Bryan West over the next 10 plus years, looking at things like, you know, parking and access and office space and the whole list of things. And certainly the fact that Bryan West has become a major referral hospital from other parts of the state is a very important part of that planning process. So bottom line is we're asking the City Council to support what we're trying to do with that Bryan West campus. And what we're asking is for you to support zoning that will preserve the whole idea and concept of a safe, secure, modern medical center in this part of the city core.
Questions?
Roy?
So are you intending on bidding on this property when it comes up for sale?
Yes, we do plan to bid on it, but we recognize, again, you know, hearing what the county process is, there's no guarantee that we will be the successful bidder or not.
Right. So I don't want to sound confrontational because I'm not being confrontational, but just so we can have this right out front, if we vote your way, you can buy that property for $600,000 less theoretically than if we go and support the county board's suggestion. Is that correct?
You know, today was the first day I've heard those numbers. I don't believe that those appraisals have been released to the public. If they are, I haven't seen them. My motivation is exactly what I just went through, is very concerned about the long-term use of that property.
Those numbers, again, were not, as we heard it, based on any O2 zoning, which would allow, you know, what I call traditional offices of any type to come and go as they please. We also are thinking that that B3 zoning is based on the fact that you're giving them a pass not to provide half the parking that you would require other commercial zones to have. And so, you know, there is a difference. I think a property, two properties equally situated, one had 24 less parking stalls than another, would appraise differently. And similarly, buildings that would be more appropriate for the neighborhood of O versus B would be appraised differently.
So, but I'm also understanding, if I heard wrong, please, somebody needs to correct me, but what I think I heard from the county people is they're willing to make sure there are restrictions on this property if it's zoned the way they would like it, that there would be no possibility of a liquor store going on there or anything else like that.
Again, we heard what you heard too, and if the declaration was that it's all O3 uses, that's a huge benefit and success for the neighborhood protection to go forward. To date, when we've been in dialogue with them, we've not heard that offer at all. So this is news.
Jane.
Could you talk about some restrictions to a B3 zoning that you would suggest to the county that
what could be
would fulfill some of, or would allay some of your concerns that you have about some type of retail going into the property? What restrictions would you suggest or advise?
Well, again, let's talk land use first. The idea that they would restrict it to the O3 uses would be very positive, because even O3 allows some O2 would allow some personal service, beauty salon in the building, et cetera, that are found in barbershops, things of that nature. So again, if it was an O2 use list, that would be very beneficial. There's not a lot of retail that is very exciting. You know, maybe medical supplies, we could get that and understand that, but you know, selling T-shirts and other things probably don't help the long-term vision of the campus for health delivery services or coffee mugs or things like that. So the list is pretty narrow. We'd be glad to work with them on that list if you so direct us. I think the real issue here is parking, because they will be able to they'll be able to have more intense. It could be a call center, for example, with lots of people in there, and yet half the parkers arguably don't have to be, they won't provide the parking on site. And so they'll be in our lots or in the neighborhood. Those are what I call the issues that you also have to look at besides the land use. And if we could work with them on parking to be sure they provide parking like normal, that's what we thought the O2 was trying to do. The problem is they're 10 stalls short, and it's because they gave up 24 in 2007. And they might say, they didn't understand what they were doing, but that's what that agreement says.
Trent.
So how would the county be able to restrict what use would be there for B3 zoning when they're going to sell the property?
I think, and again, I'm putting words in Kerry's mouth, and he should get up here to confirm or clarify what he meant. I assumed he was saying the county now is taking the position that they would rewrite the agreement that's in front of you to add more restrictions and limit it to the O2 uses. Now, you can do it. They could do it, but I don't think they would.
B3 in name only? I mean.
Right.
Well, that's where you get, a little strange, because you would be, in effect, having an office use quack like a duck when it's not quite a duck under the B3's theory.
Any other questions? Cindy, did you?
Oh, the big change in the B3 with limitations would be that they would be able to get a better value because there would be sufficient parking under B3.
That's correct. If we limit it to office O3 uses, but now don't address the parking, then you would be allowing them to have office uses and still be short the community standard on.
And the shortage of parking spaces
is about 10.
Inured to the benefit of the hospital, because they got more space. I mean, that's why there's a creation of fewer parking spaces, correct?
Repeat the question.
The benefit was to the hospital because they got more parking spaces and the county got fewer.
I'm going to share Kerry's four-corner agreement, and you have to look at the four corners, and we gave up $500,000 to settle a debt and did some other things. In return, we got 24 more parking stalls as part of the consideration.
And we pledged to accept Medicaid rates, which are about 23 cents on the dollar, so about a 77% discount to the county, similar to all other Medicaid payment.
And right now, under R4 or O2, that would result in a lower value of the property because of not having sufficient parking under either of those?
Well, that's a market question, and I guess the appraisers need to look at that. But generally, when you're short 10 stalls versus a building that isn't short 10 stalls, that would affect value a little bit. Again, I don't think we're talking great shifts in value here, because the effect when you're short 10 stalls is you're arguably not meeting building codes. 9% of your buildings shouldn't be used for office. So, we're talking the 9%, and that's what the county's saying, give it back to us. They didn't have to worry about this because they're government. They don't have to comply with zoning. But when they go to sell, the private sector has to play by the zoning ordinance requirements, and they would have to meet that parking standard unless you give them the B3 parking standard.
Other questions?
I just have a comment that I understand your parking dilemma personally, and I understand your growth issue, because as you grew, you terminated my lease and I had to move my office space out of the professional office building.
Oh, no, when did we do that?
Full disclosure.
Yeah, and so I didn't take it personally then, and I don't now, but I understand the parking issue because I parked on that side of the building where we're discussing now. So it is tight, I understand, and I'm glad I don't have to vote on this today.
Ken, I have a question for you as a development attorney, because you have a lot of experience in this field. We've heard a lot today about giving up the value, the full fair market value of this property. what is the full value, market value of any property based on? Is it based on a potential change of zone that they might be able to get but do not have, or is it based on today's zoning? What is
Well,
actually?
The simple definition is a willing buyer, willing seller. And, you know, that goes into a lot of variables of what a willing buyer, willing seller will do. Now, appraisers are asked to guess that.
Right.
And then appraisers look at all sorts of variables, highest and best use. And one of the ways they do that is look at the zoning. But even if the zoning allows, you know, really wonderfully high intense use, that doesn't mean location, and market will do those type of things. So they have to make some judgment calls. So as Kim said, we're kind of blind trying to, you know, their statement that they have a 3.1, that's obviously assuming they have B3 zoning, which, as you know, that's why we're here today. They don't quite have that. So to say they're losing, I'm not sure they had it to begin with.
Thank you.
Can I ask one more question?
Yes.
Thank you. I think that what they were saying was the full use, because they wouldn't have full use with the current parking. But I actually want to ask a question about something else. A lot of times in development, developers make an offer on a property and they bring forward potential zoning changes here before the purchase actually closes. Isn't that accurate?
It can be.
That's accurate. They'll sometimes buy property with contingency subject to rezoning, and if it doesn't happen, then they don't close, and if it happens, then they can close. Obviously, there's a public policy issue here that the legislature says they don't want government to, or the county government anyway, I think the city isn't subject to this law, to do what the private sector can do and do those contingency purchase agreements. They don't want self-dealing, you know, we in the private sector, you know, if you give me an offer, I don't have to look at it. I could decide to deal with Roy and Trent and Larian and not deal with you for some reason. The legislature says, no, we don't want that judgment call by the county. We want a more competitive, open process. So they put this process into place. So there's trade-offs here from a public policy view, and I just, you know, I can't explain why the legislature did what they did, but they decided there was a public policy reason for doing it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Would anyone else like to testify in opposition to this item?
Good afternoon. Doug Headley, 2635 South 13th Street, Lincoln, 68502. Currently the president of the Irvingdale Neighborhood Association. If you're not familiar, we are located in southwest Lincoln, with the west boundary of our neighborhood association being South 9th Street. On the east side, South 22nd Street, South Street on the north, and Van Doren Street on the south. If I may just tell you briefly, our neighborhood is home to a number of small businesses, a senior care facility, 2 public and 1 parochial school, 3 city parks, city swimming pool, city rec center, outdoor tennis courts, and among other things, a large hospital campus that not only serves our local citizens, but those living within the region. Location of the requested zoning change before you at 2201 South 17th Street also falls within the boundaries of our neighborhood. Although there are a number of smaller businesses and retail operations spread throughout our neighborhood, the primary concentration of businesses at this time is along South Street from 9th Street to roughly 17th Street. Neighborhood Association is concerned that rezoning 2201 South 17th Street from its current R4 residential to B3 commercial has the potential to open the door to any number of businesses that you have previously heard mentioned here this afternoon. The property in question and in its current state has had little to no impact on our neighborhood. We hope that the new owners, whoever it may be, can keep that balance. Neighborhood Association is also concerned that a change in zoning from the current R4 to B3 could create additional noise, vehicular traffic, not only traveling through the neighborhood, but those parking in the neighborhood. And finally, the potential of increased lighting, often associated with business and retail operations, which fall within the B3 designation. So with that, we would ask that you deny the request of zoning change from R4 to B3 at the property located at 2201 South 17th Street. As you've heard, the building is certainly going to be for sale in the near future. Please allow the future owner to seek a zoning change if even necessary, and one that fits their intended plan for use. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? John?
Would you have any response or have the ability as your president of your association to comment on this concept of an O2 zoning?
As it was previously stated, O2 had been brought up in the past, and it was my understanding that the county was not interested in that. We certainly support the O2 designation, as Mr. Seacrest noted.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Was there anyone else here to testify on this item? Okay, staff questions? Jane?
For Dave.
Okay. David Carey with the Lincoln Lancaster County Planning Department.
The question to you, is it that out of the normal process to get a zoning changed prior to some other future use? I mean, do other entities do that? I know that Kent had mentioned that it might be a contingency to close on a land transaction, a condition to close on the land transaction, but it seems to me the Planning Commission does this routinely, and it's not that abnormal to have a change of zone request.
It actually happens in both ways. Oftentimes we have a known user coming forward, perhaps as part of a new development with a known user for a box store that's going in, and we know what's going to happen there. We have had fairly recently examples of changes of zone for property that simply did not have a known user. A couple examples would be the redevelopment of the Goodrich site in the northeast corner of 48th and Pioneers. The building that's now built is for the Goodrich store, and there's going to be another more or less speculative building as well that hasn't been built yet, but we don't know what will go in there. That's just one example. So it is done both ways.
Okay, thank you.
In that example, wasn't it already commercial? I mean, there was already a Goodrich Colby Ridge store there, so that actually wasn't a change in reality.
Sure. I mean, there's other examples too. I mean, we have 9th and 10th at Van Dorn, the north side of that intersection. That was a change of zone that came forward, and granted, it's been sitting vacant for many years now, but it's also a change of zone where there wasn't a given user. I mean, there's quite a few. I mean, you can make an argument that almost every major commercial project that comes forward, especially in newly developed areas, we don't know what all is going to fill out that square footage. So, you know, we do get those that we know what's going to happen. We also get those that we don't know what's going to happen.
I think what's key in what you're saying, though, is in newly developed areas, it doesn't necessarily mean that an unknown use is coming in next to people who have already made investments in property. And as we all know, the zoning code exists in part to make sure that people who buy homes, or people who want to create developments, or people who want to locate their business have some degree of predictability. In a newer development or a newer site where there aren't established homes, or it's a very different ballgame than the built urban environment where you already have residences across the street.
Sure. There are examples where we have change zone, though, where there's an existing neighborhood. Is what I'm as far as answering that question. But yeah, those points are very much taken into consideration.
Much more common in new areas. Okay. Can you clarify as well? Are there others who have questions? We heard from one side of the argument that B3 and O2 were essentially or basically the same. We heard from the other side of the argument that no, in fact, that they are very different. Can you speak to the,
Sure.
the facts here?
Yeah, I mean, they are different. And so as far as the process that's been taken to get to this point and what was proposed to the Planning Commission and then what has come forward to you now today, basically what the finding from the staff was that a change to the B3, in our opinion, would require a significant reduction in the range of uses that would be allowed. So thus the zoning agreement that's part of this. And so what we've been working on is really stripping down the B3 range of uses down to retail sales and to personal services. There are a wide range of other uses that could be allowed in B3 that by way of this zoning agreement, we are saying that they just simply wouldn't be allowed. Everything from, I'm gonna read down the motorized vehicle repair service, motorized vehicle sales, you can go down the list. I mean, there's a lot of things that would normally be allowed in B3 that we're saying is not appropriate in this location for many of the reasons that have been brought up. So as far as coming up with the idea of how we got to this point, there was a thought process of what would make sense if it were to become B3, and it is that more limited range of retail activities.
Okay, one last question then, Jane. We heard as well that the neighborhood association and Brian, a neighbor to the site, were not invited to the neighborhood meeting about this particular application. Is your department responsible for making those invitations?
No, we are not.
Okay, so who would?
We strongly encourage that there be a neighborhood meeting. There was a neighborhood meeting. My understanding, and the applicant could speak to this more specifically, my understanding is that invitations were sent out within a certain number of feet of the action item, and those property owners did get notice, but I can't speak to that specifically. We weren't in charge of that meeting.
Okay. Jane.
So the question, David, say a retailer came in and purchased the property, knowing what those restrictions are on that B3 zoning that were put in place by the county and the planning department. Would that retailer have to come before this body, or I guess it would go through the planning department, planning commissioners, and then the city council again, if they wanted to change and eliminate those restrictions? Would that be the process they'd have to come?
Yes.
Try to do and appeal?
Yes, that zoning agreement would run with the land. If they wanted to do something that's outside of what the agreement would allow, they would have to propose a change, and it would have to be approved.
And it would have to go through us again to make that change and remove the restrictions that the county put on and you put on that B3.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
David, is it true that it's easier to remove conditions than it is to get a change of zone, based on your experience?
I think the change of zone is a higher level of change, so I would agree with that.
Thank you. Further questions for staff? Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
Yay.
Please call the next item.
Well, rebuttal, don't we get rebuttal?
Sorry, did we get
Yeah,
appropriate rebuttal? My
we had
apologies. My apologies. Wishful thinking.
Chief Administrator for the board. Jeff tells me that perhaps the agreement didn't make it into the record of the Planning Commission, so I will offer that for the record. And I see a 2007 agreement between Bryan and Lancaster County. Just a quick summation here. If you look carefully at our position, what we're talking about is the existing building and use of the existing building, and that's what we want to protect our value on. So it's very limited. As you heard the president of the neighborhood association say, the existing use has had little to no impact on the neighborhood. We think with a well-drafted agreement that the use will be substantially the same as exists now, and there will be little to no impact on the neighborhood. As Kent pointed out, we're essentially arguing about 10 stalls here that were exchanged in that agreement. So even at that is not a big impact. So when we are looking at the health and welfare of the community, which certainly is our fiduciary duty, as well as to maximize the value of our assets, I think we have looked at that, and we have been concerned and have been willing to make concessions because of the health, safety, and welfare of the neighborhood and the hospital. So I would submit that this is appropriate. It's a unique situation. Its precedential value in other situations would be virtually nil because you don't get these once in a couple of decades. So there's not a whole lot of precedential value that I think you'd need to worry about treating us differently. So.
And then, again, Todd Wilchin, Lancaster County Commissioner, just to follow up on the invitations to that meeting. The list was provided by the planning department, and it was based on law, number of feet from the property. And so if the council would like, we can certainly provide that information to you.
Did you consider inviting Brian to the meeting?
Well,
Or were you already in private discussions with them, or is?
they should have been invited because they are the closest neighbor. They are adjacent. So whether or not they received the invitation, and I mean, and it was posted as well in the facility and in the parking lot. But yeah, we would be more than happy to follow up with that.
Any more questions? Okay.
Thank you.
Now we can move on to the next item.
Okay, I'll call item 48, change of zone 16015, application of Capital Group, Inc. for a change from B1 Local Business District to B2 Planned Neighborhood Business District on property generally located at 1404 Superior Street.
Madam Chair, members of the council, Mark Hunziker appearing on behalf of Walgreens. This is a fairly simple matter of changing the zoning on this parcel to the same district as exists across the street from B1 to B2. This is a bit of a unique parcel that was carved out of a substantially larger parcel, which the remainder of which became City Park as part of the transaction that resulted in its rezoning in the first place. There were lots of negotiations that went on due to the fact that it had been a previous subject of, I think, 2 or 3 attempts to rezone it in the past. At the time it was brought forward, we negotiated everything down to the site plan in the same manner in which you would if it were zoned B2. I don't think it wasn't zone B2, I think largely because nobody thought of it at the time, but it certainly could have because it meets all the setbacks and all the other criteria of the B2 district, as well as the conditional use provisions that apply to the sale of alcohol. And we've not made any effort to hide the fact that we do want this change of zone primarily to allow for the sale of alcohol on this site. But we think it's justified. We think the appropriate zoning district for this site is B2, as was pointed out by the staff report. It's a typical district for a suburban neighborhood center. The site across the street was zoned B2 in 1979, but it had been there previously under the pre-existing G1 district, which had some similar, almost not quite identical provisions, but I don't think it would be accurate to say that that site meets all the existing current B2 zoning requirements. However, be that as it may, the district requires more than 5 acres to be a minimum size for the district. We are simply adding on to an existing 5-acre B2 parcel, and we would ask that you approve our application.
Questions?
So
Roy?
we're not talking about adding or subtracting parking spaces?
No, we are not. Absolutely not. Nor are we changing any uses.
Any other questions? Thank you for your patience getting to this point. Would anyone else like to speak to this item? Staff questions? Okay, next item, please.
All right, next is item 49, approving a lease agreement between the city and Silver Properties LLC for a lease of space for a 1-year term for use by the Lincoln Police Department.
Is the applicant here? Want to come on down?
Jeff Kleinmeister, Chief of Police. This is a renewal of an existing lease agreement. The costs are shared annually. It's a collaborative effort with the Nebraska State Patrol. We've been at this location for approximately 15 years.
Any questions? Go ahead, Carl.
I don't see where this location is. Where are we talking about?
This is in the northeast quadrant of the city of Lincoln. It's an investigative location where we house one of our investigative units out of.
As such, it might be good not to have everybody know where it is?
That would be preferred.
All right.
All right, any other questions? Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak to this item? All right, probably no staff questions. All right, Teresa, can you please take us through?
Oh, no, look at this.
Next.
Oh, my goodness. You want to testify, or are you in the next item?
I was jumping the gun. I was so excited.
He's here for item 50. Public hearing ordinance, third reading. Item 50 is approving the establishment of the West O Street Maintenance Business Improvement District within the exterior boundaries of an area generally along West O Street from 3rd Street on the east to Homestead Expressway on the west, and including the property abutting the north and south sides of said West O Street right-of-way.
David Landis, Urban Development Department Director, the applicant in this case. And on a day that's as jam-packed and fun-filled as this is, you want to build to a peak experience. The West O Business Association has helped guide us through the declaration of the historical significance of the Detroit-Lincoln-Denver Highway. We celebrate that fact with special ornamental signage, a special plaza that exists just over the Harris Overpass, and a special native grass median close to the Homestead Passover. The West O Business Association has always agreed that they would be responsible for the maintenance of those pieces on an ongoing basis because, as you know, we're well strapped for right-of-way and parks and maintenance. So, 3 meetings of property holders, 2 meetings of the people that you designated to be tasked with the responsibility of drawing up a business improvement district have all occurred, largely without controversy. And in fact, we've had one of those designers here ever since 3 o'clock today, listening to the same things that we've all been listening to today, and still here to tell you how much they would like to be able to do this work. This, by the way, is a little plaza right on the far side of the west of the Harris Overpass, and it celebrates this unique historical part of our transportation system. But the maintenance and care of that will be the responsibility of the Business Improvement District, as will the median. Current expenditure costs are $7,000. Full year, it should be $14,000. There's 18,000 square feet. It'll be less than $1 a foot. It'll be 86.
Flowers are not a part of the Business Improvement District.
That's not this one, is it? No.
Well, you didn't mention the cute railroad signs on the, in that area.
Would I do better if I had that picture?
No.
Okay. All right. Anyway, it'll cost the landholders less than $1 a square foot to do the maintenance. And, in fact, the heavy lifting was done by the committee, and one of their members is still here. Could I answer any questions?
Okay, I don't see any questions. Thanks, David.
Excuse me.
Would you like to get the screens? Thank you. Okay, would anyone else like to testify in favor of this item?
I'm Mike Diebert. I'm a board member with the West O Street Business Association. I'm also the chair of the Business Improvement District. As was mentioned, we held a lot of different kind of hearings, gave input, tried to clarify any kinds of questions that people may have had that have businesses along that corridor. As you probably are aware, that's an industrial corridor, and those tend to be a little bit tougher to keep up in appearance. And we like to think it's some sort of entrance into the city from the west, and trying to keep that up and keep it beautified as best we can would definitely help the appearance and the welcoming, inviting appearance of the city. So I'm more than willing to answer any questions that you guys might have as well.
Any questions? Rob?
Yes, Mike, thanks for being here. And you work for?
I work for Nebraska Machinery Company.
Okay.
I'm on the way
Yep.
end of this.
Yep,
Yeah.
great. Well, thanks. And, the West O Business Group has really made huge improvements to the area, and you're right, it is an important gateway now, so thank you.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else here to speak to this item? Any staff questions? Okay, Teresa, why don't you take
All
us
right,
through?
that concludes our public hearing. We can move into the voting session. Public hearing resolutions. Report of claims against the city for May 1st through the 15th, introduced by Rabel.
So moved.
Moved by Raybold, seconded by Christensen, and we've got Discussion.
Yes.
John, then
I'd
Carl,
like to
then
make a
Trent.
motion to delete the State Farm insurance claim for Dolores Horning.
Delete.
Delete.
And by delete, do you mean?
Put on pending?
Or put on pending.
Okay. Second.
Thank you.
There's a. Can, want to come on up?
A Freudian slip.
It worked.
Certainly you can do either, but if you delete it, then you're not denying it, you're not confirming it. It's a claim that remains pending before the city for, we hope, speedy resolution. If you put it on pending, then you got something saying on pending until we get it resolved, and then you're looking at it every week, and it bothers Trent, and but you can do whatever you want to.
Freud would like to go back to delete.
Is there a rule, though, about it being on the agenda for next week if it's deleted? Is there anything in our rules about that?
No,
Okay.
no.
So it doesn't automatically carry
It'd be
over?
like making an amendment, and you make an amendment to any resolution that you're voting on it, so it's settled and it doesn't come back automatically.
Did you have a question?
Maybe a better way to phrase it would be to remove the claim instead of delete.
So it would just be listed here in the pending claims, is that right?
It wouldn't be listed at all.
It wouldn't,
I'm
it would be,
asking.
yeah, it wouldn't be listed at all, but it remains a claim with the city, and so it would come back before this council at some point in time.
Another resolution.
Yeah.
Carl, did you have something to say? I think you were first.
Go ahead.
Okay. I'm going to vote against John's amendment. I know I brought the issue up, but I was satisfied with the city attorney's opinion. I think there's a certain point of age where you learn that you pull over for fire trucks, and I think it's maybe about 3 years old. And, following a fire truck into an emergency zone has its consequences. And, granted, we'd like our city employees that drive fire trucks to be cognizant of the people behind them, but sometimes when they need to get to an emergency, they're not able to do that, and that's why you pull over. In this case, I don't think that that claim is merited based on the fact that they were following a fire truck into an emergency zone.
Cindy?
Thank you. I think what we heard, though, is that not that that's going to alleviate the city of all responsibility, because the city has some liability in backing its truck into someone. So I think by eliminating it, what we're doing is we're giving the city more time to determine exactly what that division of liability might be, so that they could settle it without us being subject to having to defend a lawsuit in order for that to happen.
I don't disagree with that, but I think that should be on the person that applied rather than on the city to take that further.
Who seconded John's motion?
I did.
Thank you, Carl.
Yeah. I guess I'd like a point of clarification with the attorney, because what the email told us was that she was parked. And what you told us was that she had moved around the vehicle, and I'm interested in Trent's line of argument, but it seems to me that's a relevant fact. In that
Right. Two points I'd like to make briefly. One is that the lights, as I understand on the fire truck, were not on. And so makes it less of an emergency situation, perhaps more understandable that she did follow the fire truck around those two vehicles than if the fire trucks had been on.
Okay.
I don't want to misrepresent that situation. And I think we would be feeling less liable for the city had those lights been on. But she did, in fact, follow the fire truck around those two vehicles and was behind the fire truck as it backed up. So it wasn't a matter of the truck being parked, she parked next to it, and then for a reason she didn't understand it backed up. We're talking about being in a city street, is how I understand it. The second point I'd like to make briefly, and maybe I should have the first time I came up here, the reason why this is on in this resolution is the department felt that by denying it, it put us in a better position to get it resolved. And that's why we made the recommendation we did.
Any further discussion on the motion? Okay, So Teresa, can you read the motion that's on the table?
Remove the claim of State Farm from the denied.
Okay, and call the roll.
Camp,
Yes.
Christensen,
Yes.
Eskridge.
Yes.
Fellers,
No.
Gaylor Baird,
Yes.
Lamb,
Yes.
Raybold.
No.
Motion carried 5-2.
Main motion.
Main motion, please. Can you call the roll on the main motion, please?
Camp,
Yes.
Christensen,
Yes.
Eskridge.
Yes.
Fellers.
Yes.
Gaylor Baird,
Yes.
Lamb,
Yes.
Raybold.
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Item 41, special permit 16022, introduced by Raybold.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Raybold, second by Camp. Any discussion? Okay, please call the roll.
Camp,
Yes.
Christensen,
Yes.
Eskridge. Fellers,
Yes.
Gaylor Baird,
Yes.
Lamb, Raybold.
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Item 42 is ordering the construction of sidewalks along the west side of 48th Street from Holdridge to Layton, introduced by Lamb.
So moved.
Second. I'd like to introduce moving to the 1st of August.
Motion to delay.
Motion to
Pending.
delay to the 1st of August.
Second.
Okay, the original motion was moved by Cindy, seconded by Roy, and Roy has since moved, and Jane has seconded a delay. Any discussion on the?
With continued public hearing?
With continued public hearing.
Delay public hearing and action to August 1st. Very good.
Okay. Please call the roll.
Camp,
Yes.
Christensen,
Yes.
Eskridge.
Yes.
Fellers,
Yes.
Gaylor Baird,
Yes.
Lamb,
Yes.
Raybold.
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Public hearing ordinances second reading are items 42 through 49. Item 50, approving the establishment of the West O Street Maintenance Business Improvement District, introduced by Lamb.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Lamb, second by Christensen.
Motion to amend, number 1?
Yes, we do.
Would someone like to move that? Carl, are you?
I would move that. It's to eliminate properties north of West O Street at the far west end of the district which do not abut West O.
So moved. Second, I mean.
Moved by Carl, second by Roy. Discussion? Okay, please call the roll on the motion to amend.
Camp,
Yes.
Christensen,
Yes.
Eskridge.
Yes.
Fellers,
Yes.
Gaylor Baird,
Yes.
Lamb,
Yes.
Raybold.
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0.
And now on the main motion, please call the roll.
Camp,
Yes.
Christensen,
Yes.
Eskridge.
Yes.
Fellers,
Yes.
Gaylor Baird,
Yes.
Lamb,
Yes.
Raybold.
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Item 51, amending Section 1 of Ordinance 20312, approving Prairie Village North Annexation 16002 to correct the legal description to be consistent with the corporate limits map amendment shown on attachment A, attached to Ordinance 20312, introduced by Lamb.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Cindy, seconded by Carl. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Camp,
Yes.
Christensen,
Yes.
Eskridge.
Yes.
Fellers,
Yes.
Gaylor Baird,
Yes.
Lamb,
Yes.
Raybold.
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Resolutions on first reading are items 52 through 58. Ordinances on first reading are items 59 through 62.
Madam Chair, I'd move for adjournment.
Second.
Moved by John and seconded by just about everyone, but I'll give that to Trent.
I'll take it.
Camp,
Yes.
Christensen,
Yes.
Eskridge.
Yes.
Fellers.
Yes.
Gaylor Baird,
Yes.
Lamb, Raybold.
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0.